When Lewis Hamilton walked into that room at Silverstone Circuit, he thought it would be just another meet and greet with young fans. He had done hundreds of these events before, kids asking for autographs, parents snapping photos, everyone excited to meet a seven-time Formula One world champion. But then he met Aria Winters. She was 11 years old with unusual amber eyes and messy auburn hair. While other children bounced with excitement, she stood perfectly still. While they wore bright racing shirts, she wore a simple gray sweater. And while they asked for photos and autographs, she asked him a question that would change his life forever. "Mr. Hamilton," she said quietly, looking directly at him, "if you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it?" The room went silent. Lewis froze. This wasn't a normal fan question. There was something haunting in the way she asked it, something knowing, as if she already understood his answer before he gave it. Lewis had answered thousands of questions from journalists around the world. Questions about racing strategy, about championships, about his rivalries with other drivers. But this question from an 11-year-old girl, he had no idea what to say. Before he could respond, Aria's grandmother gently pulled her away, apologizing. But as they left, Lewis noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. A medical alert bracelet on Aria's thin wrist. His assistant whispered the devastating truth. The girl is terminally ill. She has maybe 18 months to live. Suddenly, Aria's question wasn't just philosophical. It was personal. It was desperate. It was the question of a child facing death, trying to understand if the sacrifices people make for their dreams are worth it. She hadn't been asking about him at all. She had been asking about herself. What Lewis didn't know was that this one question would lead him on a journey that would force him to make an impossible choice. A choice between racing for his 8th world championship and staying with a dying girl who needed him. A choice that would define what kind of man he really was. And what Aria didn't know was that Lewis Hamilton was about to give her something she desperately needed. Not more time, but something even more precious. But here's the twist that will leave you stunned. Aria had a 220 IQ, one of the highest ever recorded. She could solve complex physics problems that stumped university professors. She could read in 5 languages. She understood quantum mechanics and philosophy at a level most adults never reach. Yet with all that intelligence, she couldn't answer the one question that mattered most. Should she take an experimental treatment that might give her 5 more years of life, but would mean 6 months of isolation and suffering, with only a 30% chance of success? Or should she refuse the treatment and spend her final 18 months really living, creating something meaningful before she died? The clock was ticking. Aria had just days to make her decision. And somehow, Lewis Hamilton, a race car driver who had never lost someone close to him, was the only person who could help her find her answer. What happens next will break your heart and change how you think about life forever. Watch until the end to discover the shocking choice Aria makes, the sacrifice Lewis is willing to make for her, and the powerful legacy she leaves behind that's touching millions of lives around the world right now. This is the true story of how one impossible question led to the most important choice either of them would ever make. The summer sun blazed over Silverstone Circuit, turning the asphalt into rivers of heat. Thousands of racing fans filled the grandstands, their cheers echoing across the famous British racetrack. Red, white, and blue flags waved in the warm breeze. The smell of burning rubber and hot engines filled the air. Inside the Mercedes hospitality suite, Lewis Hamilton checked his watch. He had exactly 45 minutes before his next meeting with the team engineers. 45 minutes to meet the children who had won a special competition through his Mission 44 Foundation. "Are you ready, Lewis?" asked his assistant Marcus, holding a clipboard. "We have 12 kids waiting. Most of them are between 8 and 13 years old." Lewis smiled and nodded. This was his favorite part of race weekends. Not the fame, not the cameras, not even the racing itself sometimes. It was meeting young people who dreamed big dreams just like he once did. "Let's do this," he said, straightening his Mercedes team shirt. The children waited in a bright room decorated with racing posters and trophies. When Lewis walked in, their faces lit up like fireworks. Some jumped up and down. Others stood frozen, mouths hanging open. A few started crying happy tears. Lewis spent time with each child. He signed autographs on caps, shirts, and photos. He posed for pictures, making silly faces to help nervous kids relax. He asked them questions about school, their hobbies, their dreams. "I want to be a race car driver just like you," said a boy named Oliver, bouncing on his toes. "Then work hard and never give up," Lewis told him, kneeling down to look him in the eye. "Dream big, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it." A girl named Sophie asked about his dog, Roscoe. Another boy wanted to know about his Mercedes car. Each child got a moment with their hero, a memory they would treasure forever. Then came the 11th child in line. She was different from the others. While the other children had bounced with excitement, she stood perfectly still. While they wore bright racing shirts and team colors, she wore a simple gray sweater despite the summer heat. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail with loose strands falling around her face. She had unusual amber-colored eyes that seemed to look right through things. She didn't carry anything for Lewis to sign. No hat, no photo, no shirt, just a small notebook clutched against her chest. "Hello there," Lewis said warmly, walking over to her. "What's your name?" "Aria Winters," she replied quietly. Her voice was calm and clear, not shy exactly, but careful, thoughtful. "It's nice to meet you, Aria. Are you enjoying the race weekend?" "I don't really follow racing," she said simply. Lewis blinked, surprised. That was a first. "Oh, then why did you enter the competition to meet me?" Aria looked down at her notebook, then back up at Lewis. Her amber eyes were intense, serious in a way that seemed strange for someone so young. "Because I needed to ask you something," she said. "Something important." "Okay," Lewis said, intrigued. He sat down in a nearby chair so they would be at the same eye level. "What did you want to ask me?" Marcus and the other adults in the room continued chatting and taking photos with the remaining children. Background noise filled the space, laughter, camera clicks, excited voices. But around Lewis and Aria, everything seemed to go quiet. Aria opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Her fingers tightened around her notebook. "Mr. Hamilton," she began, her voice steady but soft. "If you could go back in time and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it?" The room didn't actually go silent, but to Lewis it felt like it did. His smile faded. His hands, which had been relaxed on his knees, went still. He stared at this strange, serious child who had just asked him something that cut straight to his heart. Around them, life continued. Marcus laughed at something. A camera flashed. A child squealed with joy. But Lewis couldn't hear any of it. He could only hear Aria's question echoing in his mind. "If you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it?" "That's," Lewis started, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? This wasn't a normal question. This wasn't "what's your favorite track?" or "how fast does your car go?" This was something deeper, something that felt almost painful to think about. "Why would you ask me that?" he finally said, his voice quieter than before. Aria didn't answer right away. She looked at him with those intense amber eyes, studying his face like she was reading a book. "Because I think you know what it's like," she said slowly, "to love something and someone at the same time. And I think you understand that sometimes loving something means other people have to sacrifice. And I wanted to know if you think it's worth it." Lewis felt his chest tight. How did this child, this girl who couldn't be more than 11 or 12, ask questions that philosophers struggled with? How did she know exactly what to say to reach past all his defenses and touch something real? Before he could respond, an older woman rushed over. She was thin, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and worry lines etched deep around her eyes. She wore a cardigan despite the heat and moved with the urgent energy of someone used to managing emergencies. "Aria, sweetheart, I'm so sorry," the woman said, gently touching the girl's shoulder. She looked at Lewis with an apologetic expression. "I'm Alina Winters, her grandmother. I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Hamilton. She's very advanced for her age. Sometimes she asks things that are perhaps too grown-up." "No, it's okay," Lewis said quickly, standing up, but his mind was still spinning. "Actually, I'd like to talk more with her. That's actually a really important question, Aria." Aria looked up at him, something flickering in her eyes. Hope, relief, Lewis couldn't tell. "Can we talk again sometime?" he asked her directly, ignoring the protocol that said he should speak to the grandmother instead. Aria nodded once, serious and certain. "Good," Lewis said, "because I think I need to figure out my answer first." Alina gently guided Aria toward the door, apologizing again. Marcus appeared at Lewis's elbow, ready to move him along to the next child, the next photo, the next moment. But as Arya reached the doorway, she turned back. Her thin hand rested on the doorframe, and that's when Lewis saw it. A medical alert bracelet. It was silver, catching the light from the window. Even from across the room, Lewis could see it was worn smooth from constant wear. The kind of bracelet people wore when something was seriously wrong. His heart dropped into his stomach. "Lewis," Marcus said, "the last child is waiting." But Lewis barely heard him. He watched Arya and her grandmother disappear down the hallway, that silver bracelet glinting one last time before she vanished from sight. Marcus leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I checked on her after she signed up for the competition. The girl, she's terminally ill, Lewis. Something called Batten disease. I didn't want to say anything before you met her, didn't want to make it weird, but I thought you should know." Lewis felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Suddenly, Arya's question wasn't just philosophical. It wasn't just interesting or thought-provoking. It was personal. It was desperate. It was the question of a child who was facing death and trying to understand if the sacrifices people make for their dreams are worth it. If love is worth the pain it causes. If a short life spent chasing something you love is better than a longer life playing it safe. She hadn't been asking about him at all. She'd been asking about herself. "Mr. Hamilton," said a small voice. The 12th child, a boy with glasses and a shy smile, stood waiting for his turn. Lewis blinked hard, forcing himself back to the present. He smiled at the boy, signed his cap, took a photo. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. It was following a girl with amber eyes and impossible questions down a hallway. It was wondering what saving someone you love meant when that someone was yourself. It was realizing that sometimes the people who ask the hardest questions are the ones who need the answers most. When the meet and greet finally ended, Lewis walked out into the bright sunshine of Silverstone. Fans called his name. Cameras flashed. The world kept spinning, loud and bright and demanding. But all Lewis could hear was a quiet voice asking, "Would you do it?" And for the first time in his life, Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history, a man who had answered 1,000 questions from journalists around the world, had absolutely no idea what to say. 5 years earlier, Devon, England. Sarah Winters sat on the floor of her tiny living room, surrounded by alphabet blocks and picture books. Her daughter Arya was only 18 months old, barely able to walk without wobbling. Most toddlers her age were just learning to say mama and dada. But Arya wasn't most toddlers. "The cat sat on the mat," Arya read aloud, her tiny finger following the words in the children's book. Her voice was clear, perfect, not baby talk, real words. Sarah's hand shook. She looked at her husband Thomas, who stood frozen in the doorway, his work boots still muddy from the factory. His mouth hung open. "Did she just?" Thomas whispered. "Read," Sarah finished. "Yes, she just read the whole sentence." They had noticed something different about Arya from the beginning. At 3 months, she made eye contact differently than other babies. At 6 months, she pointed at letters on cereal boxes. At 1 year, she stacked blocks in complex patterns while other children just knocked them down. But reading, at 18 months, maybe she memorized it, Thomas suggested hopefully. "Maybe she's just repeating what you said." Sarah picked up a different book, one they had never read before. She opened to a random page and held it in front of Arya. "The dog ran fast," Arya read without hesitation. "He wanted to play." Sarah started crying. Thomas sat down hard on the couch, his face pale. Their daughter wasn't normal, and they had no idea what that meant. 3 months later, Dr. Patricia Chen's office was filled with diplomas and certificates. She was a child development specialist, one of the best in England. She had tested Arya for 3 hours, giving her puzzles and games and questions designed for much older children. Now she sat across from Thomas and Sarah, her expression serious. "Your daughter," Dr. Chen began carefully, "is what we call profoundly gifted. Her cognitive development is approximately 4 years ahead of her chronological age." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, gripping Thomas's hand. "It means at 18 months old she has the intellectual capacity of a 5-year-old, possibly older." Dr. Chen paused. "I've tested thousands of children in my career. I've never seen anything quite like Arya." Thomas leaned forward. "But she'll be okay, right? I mean, being smart is good, isn't it?" Dr. Chen's expression softened with sympathy. Being gifted can be challenging, Mr. Winters. Arya's brain will develop differently. She'll understand things other children don't. She'll ask questions that are hard to answer. She might feel isolated or different. We can handle different, Sarah said firmly. We'll figure it out. But they had no idea how different Arya would become. Age 3. Arya sat at the kitchen table, working through a mathematics workbook designed for 7-year-olds. She filled in the answers to multiplication problems while humming softly to herself. Sarah watched from the doorway, stirring a pot of soup. She didn't understand the math Arya was doing. Neither did Thomas. They had both left school at 16 to work at the textile factory in town. "Mama," Arya said without looking up, "why do numbers go on forever?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Numbers, they never stop. You can always add one more. But why? Who decided that?" Arya's amber eyes were serious, troubled even. "And if numbers go on forever, does that mean forever exists, or is forever just an idea?" Sarah stirred her soup and tried to think of an answer. How did you explain infinity to a 3-year-old? How did you explain it when you barely understood it yourself? "I don't know, baby," she admitted. "That's a very big question." Arya nodded and went back to her workbook, apparently satisfied. But Sarah noticed her daughter's shoulders slump slightly, like she was disappointed. That became a pattern. Arya asked questions nobody could answer. She read books nobody else in the family could understand. She solved puzzles that frustrated adults. The other children in the village avoided her. When Sarah took Arya to the playground, the little girl would sit alone, drawing mathematical equations in the sand while other children played tag. "She's strange," Sarah heard one mother whisper. "It's not natural for a child to be like that." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to defend her brilliant daughter, but a small part of her understood what they meant. Sometimes, when Arya looked at her with those knowing eyes, Sarah felt like she was being studied instead of loved. Age 5. The stack of library books on Arya's bed reached almost to the ceiling. Introduction to Quantum Physics, The Philosophy of Time, Advanced Calculus Made Simple. Thomas stood in the doorway, shaking his head. "She's 5 years old. She should be reading fairy tales." "She read all the fairy tales last year," Sarah said quietly. "She said they were intellectually unstimulating." "She's 5, Thomas repeated, his voice rising with frustration and fear. 5-year-olds don't talk like that. They don't use words like intellectually unstimulating." Alina Winters, Sarah's mother, came upstairs carrying a tray of snacks. She was a retired teacher, the only person in the family who seemed to understand Arya at all. "Leave her be, Thomas," Alina said gently. "The child is gifted. You should be proud." "I am proud," Thomas said, and his voice cracked. "But I'm also scared. What kind of life is she going to have? She doesn't have friends, she doesn't play, she just thinks all the time. What kind of childhood is that?" Alina set down the tray and put a hand on her son-in-law's shoulder. "It's the childhood she was born to have. You can't change who she is. You can only love her through it." That night, Sarah found Arya sitting by her window, looking at the stars. "Mama, how big is the universe?" "Very big, sweetheart." "But how big exactly? And what's outside the universe? And if the universe is expanding, what is it expanding into?" Arya pressed her small hand against the glass. "And why do I understand these questions but nobody can answer them?" Sarah sat down beside her daughter and pulled her close. Arya was thin, delicate. She always had been. She rarely ate, too focused on whatever was happening in her brilliant mind. "I don't know the answers, Arya, but you know what? Maybe someday you'll figure them out. Maybe your brain is special because you're meant to discover things nobody else can." Arya leaned against her mother, and for a moment, she was just a little girl seeking comfort. "I wish I was normal," she whispered. "I wish I could play with the other children and not think about universe expansion and quantum mechanics and whether time is real." Sarah's heart broke. "I know, baby, I know." Age 7, the diagnosis. The hospital room was cold and white. Arya sat on the examination table, swinging her legs. She had been tired lately, clumsy. Sometimes her words came out slurred, like she couldn't quite control her mouth. Sarah had hoped it was nothing, just a phase, just exhaustion from thinking too hard, but the doctor's face told her otherwise. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters," Dr. Hammond said, his voice heavy with sympathy. "The tests confirm our fears. Arya has Batten disease. It's a rare genetic disorder that affects the nervous system." "What does that mean?" Thomas demanded. "How do we fix it?" Dr. Hammond looked down at his clipboard. "There is no cure. Batten disease is progressive and fatal. Arya will gradually lose her motor skills, her vision, her ability to function. Most children with this form of the disease live until their mid-teens at best." The room spun. Sarah grabbed the edge of a chair to keep from falling. "How long?" she whispered. "How long does she have?" "It's hard to say exactly. Perhaps 6 to 8 years, maybe a bit more." Sarah looked at Arya, who sat quietly listening to everything. Her brilliant daughter, her impossible genius, was dying. "I understand," Arya said calmly. Her 7-year-old voice was steady, accepting. "My brain is eating itself. The lipofuscin is building up in my neural tissue. I read about it last month when I started having symptoms." The adults stared at her in shock. "You knew," Sarah gasped. "I suspected," Arya corrected. "The tremors and speech difficulties matched the clinical description. I was hoping I was wrong." She looked at her mother with those amber eyes. "But I wasn't, was I?" Dr. Hammond cleared his throat. "Arya, you're remarkably informed." "I'm remarkably a lot of things," Arya said quietly, "but apparently I'm not remarkably lucky. The impossible choice." Thomas and Sarah spent every penny they had on specialists. They traveled to London, to Edinburgh, to clinics across Europe. Everyone said the same thing: there was no cure. They could try experimental treatments that might slow the progression. They could manage symptoms. They could make Arya comfortable, but they couldn't save her. One night, sitting at their kitchen table covered in medical bills, Thomas and Sarah had to make a choice. "We could sell the house," Thomas said. "Move into something smaller. Use the money for treatments that might buy her a few more years." "Or," Sarah whispered, "or we give her the best life possible with the time she has. We travel, we learn, we make memories. We let her be a child even if she's not like other children." Sarah looked at a photo of Arya on the refrigerator. She was smiling, standing in front of a blackboard covered with equations. She looked happy. "I want her to live," Sarah said. "Really live. Not spend her childhood in hospitals getting treatments that probably won't work." "Me too," Thomas agreed, tears streaming down his face. They chose life. Rich, full life, however short it would be. Age 9, the accident. The rain came down in sheets that November evening. Thomas drove carefully on the winding country road, Sarah beside him, Arya in the back seat reading by the car's interior light. They were returning from a weekend in Bath, where they had taken Arya to see the Roman architecture she had read about. "Did you enjoy it, Arya?" Sarah asked, turning around in her seat. "Very much," Arya replied. "The engineering was fascinating. To think they built such structures without modern technology." The truck came out of nowhere. It skidded on the wet road, sliding sideways across the center line. Thomas jerked the wheel, trying to avoid it, but there was no time. The impact was deafening. Metal screamed, glass shattered, the world spun, then silence. When Arya woke up in the hospital 3 days later, her grandmother Alina was sitting beside her bed, crying. "Grandma," Arya's voice was hoarse. "Where are Mama and Papa?" Alina's face crumpled. She took Arya's hand gently. "They're gone, sweetheart. They died in the accident, but you survived. You're going to be okay." Arya stared at the ceiling. Her body hurt, her head hurt, but worse than any physical pain was the realization forming in her brilliant, terrible mind. She had survived. The two people who loved her most, who had sacrificed everything for her, who had chosen to give her a beautiful short life instead of a long, desperate one, they were gone, and she was still here. "It should have been me," Arya whispered. "No," Alina said firmly, gripping her granddaughter's hand. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." But Arya couldn't stop thinking it. Her parents had died trying to give her a good life, and now that life felt like a burden she didn't deserve to carry. Age 11, present day. Arya sat in her small bedroom in Alina's cottage, surrounded by books and papers. The walls were covered with questions she had written on sticky notes. What makes a life valuable? Is meaning found or created? Does impact matter more than duration? Can a short life be complete? On her desk sat a photograph of her parents. She looked at it every day, asking them the questions she could never ask in life. Would they regret their choice? Would they wish they had tried the treatments, even if it meant Arya spent her childhood suffering? Would they think the extra years were worth the extra pain? She had discovered Lewis Hamilton while researching famous people who had overcome obstacles. She read his biography and learned about his brother Nicholas, who had cerebral palsy. She read about his father's sacrifices, working multiple jobs to fund Lewis's racing dreams. And she realized Lewis might understand her question better than anyone. So she entered the Mission 44 competition, not because she cared about racing, but because she needed to know, do people who sacrifice for their dreams ever regret it? Do people who are loved resent the burden of that love? Is it better to live a short, authentic life or a longer, compromised one? Because Arya had been offered a choice too. There was an experimental treatment program in Switzerland, 6 months of isolation in a sterile facility, multiple surgeries, treatments that would make her violently ill, a 30% chance of success, and if it worked, maybe 5 to 10 more years of life. Elinor desperately wanted Arya to take it. Every day matters, she begged. Every moment is precious. But Arya had read about sensory deprivation. She had studied the psychological effects of isolation. She understood what 6 months of that treatment would do to her mind, and she thought about her parents who had chosen quality over quantity, who had given her a beautiful life instead of a long, painful one. Tomorrow, she would have to give the Swiss clinic her final answer, and she still didn't know what to say. She opened her journal and wrote. I asked him the question. He didn't answer, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He understood what I was really asking. Tomorrow, I'll tell him why it matters. Tomorrow, I'll tell him about the choice I have to make. Tomorrow, I'll find out if my parents would be proud of me or heartbroken by what I'm about to do. Arya closed the journal and looked at the medical alert bracelet on her wrist. She had maybe 18 months left, maybe less. The question was, how would she spend them? In a hospital, hoping for a miracle, or living, really living for whatever time remained? She thought about Lewis Hamilton's face when she asked her question, the way he froze, the way something flickered in his eyes, recognition, understanding, pain. He knew what she was asking, and tomorrow she would find out if he had an answer. Lewis Hamilton sat alone in his hotel room at midnight, staring at the ceiling. Outside his window, Silverstone was quiet now. The roar of engines had faded hours ago. The crowds had gone home. The track lay empty under the summer stars. But inside Lewis's mind, everything was loud. If you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it? He couldn't stop hearing Arya's voice. Couldn't stop seeing those amber eyes looking at him, waiting for an answer he didn't have. Lewis rolled over and grabbed his phone from the nightstand. He scrolled through photos from the day himself with fans, the team celebrating, the usual race weekend pictures. But his thumb stopped on one image. Marcus had taken it without Lewis noticing. It showed him kneeling in front of Arya, his face serious, caught in the moment right after she asked her question. You could see the shock in his expression, the confusion, the pain. He zoomed in on Arya's face in the background. She looked so small, so fragile. That medical bracelet glinted on her thin wrist, terminally ill, Batten disease. Lewis typed the words into his phone search engine. What he read made his stomach twist. Progressive neurological disorder. No cure, fatal. Patients gradually lose motor function, speech, vision. Death typically occurs in teenage years. He set the phone down and pressed his palms against his eyes. This child was dying. And she had used her precious time, her limited energy, to come ask him about sacrifice and choice and whether love was worth the pain it caused. Why? Lewis got up and walked to the window. London glowed in the distance, a smear of light against the dark countryside. He had raced at Silverstone dozens of times. He knew every turn, every straightaway. Racing was in his blood, in his bones, in every cell of his body. But if he could trade it all to save someone he loved, would he? His phone buzzed. A text from his father, Anthony. Great job today, son. You look strong out there. Get some rest. Love you. Lewis stared at the message. His father, the man who had worked 3 jobs to fund Lewis's karting career when he was just a boy, who had driven him to races across England, sleeping in their car to save money on hotels, who had believed in him when nobody else did. Anthony had sacrificed everything for Lewis's dream. Had it been worth it? Lewis hit the call button before he could overthink it. Lewis, Anthony's voice was thick with sleep. Everything okay? It's past midnight. Sorry, Dad, I needed to talk to you. What's wrong? You sound strange. Lewis sat on the edge of his bed, phone pressed to his ear. "Dad, have you ever regretted what we gave up for racing?" Silence stretched on the other end of the line. Louis heard his father take a breath, then another. "That's a heavy question for this time of night, son." "I know, but I need to know. All those years, all those sacrifices, missing family events, working yourself to exhaustion, fighting to get me into better teams. Did you ever wish you could go back and choose differently?" Anthony was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, thoughtful. "I regretted every moment I missed," he said finally. "Every school play where I couldn't be there. Every family dinner I had to skip. Every time your mother had to do everything alone because I was working double shifts." Louis felt his chest tight. "But," Anthony continued, "I never regretted helping you chase your dream. Not once. Not even on the hardest days. Because I wasn't just funding a racing career, Louis. I was showing you that when you love someone, you fight for them. You sacrifice for them. You believe in them even when the world doesn't." "But what if racing meant losing someone?" Louis asked, his voice cracking slightly. "What if you had to choose? What if you could go back and take a different path and it meant saving someone you love?" The line went silent again. Louis could hear his father breathing, thinking. "Then it wouldn't be worth it," Anthony said simply. "Family always comes first, Louis. Always. Racing is what you do. Family is who you are. If I had to choose between your career and someone I love, there wouldn't even be a choice to make." Louis closed his eyes. "Even after everything, even after we've achieved so much." "Son, you could have 0 championships or 20 championships. It wouldn't change the math. People matter more than trophies. Love matters more than glory." Anthony paused. "Why are you asking me this? What happened today?" Louis told him about Arya, about her question, about the medical bracelet and Marcus's whispered revelation. "This child is dying, Dad, and she asked me this question like she was trying to understand something important, like maybe she's facing her own impossible choice." Anthony was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Then maybe she doesn't need you to have an answer, Louis. Maybe she needs you to help her find her own." After they hung up, Louis sat in the dark, turning his father's words over in his mind. But he still couldn't escape the fundamental question. What would he give up? What would he sacrifice? Where was the line between pursuing your dreams and protecting the people you love? He thought about his mother, Carmen, the way she had supported him even after she and Anthony separated, the way she always put him and his brother first, no matter what. He thought about Nicholas, his little brother. Born with cerebral palsy, unable to walk without assistance, unable to do so many things that Louis took for granted. Nicholas had never complained, never been jealous, never made Louis feel guilty for having the abilities and opportunities he did. Instead, Nicholas cheered louder than anyone at every race. He celebrated every victory like it was his own. But Louis remembered the times he had missed important moments in Nicholas's life because of racing. Hospital appointments he couldn't attend. Birthdays he had to celebrate late. Calls he couldn't take because he was in a different time zone chasing another trophy. Had he chosen racing over his brother, the thought made Louis feel sick. He grabbed his phone again and called Nicholas. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Louis, mate, it's the middle of the night." "I know, I'm sorry, can I ask you something?" "Course, what's up?" Louis took a breath. "Nick, do you ever resent me for racing, for all the time I'm gone, for having this career while I what?" Nicholas's voice was sharper now, more awake. "While I have cerebral palsy, while I can't race. Is that what you were going to say?" "I didn't mean." "Louis, stop," Nicholas sighed. "Listen to me. I don't resent you, I never have. Your success isn't my failure. Your ability to race doesn't make my disability worse. We're not in competition, bro. We're family. But I miss so much of your life. I'm never there when you need me." "You're there when it matters," Nicholas said firmly. "And you know what? Watching you race, watching you succeed, watching you break barriers and make history, that gives me hope, Louis. It shows me that limitations are they're just challenges to overcome. You inspire me." Louis felt tears burning in his eyes. "You inspire me, Nick. You always have." "Then we're even," Nicholas yawned. "Now can I go back to sleep? Some of us have normal people's schedules." Louis laughed despite himself. "Yeah, love you, brother. Love you too. And Lewis, whatever's bothering you, whatever question you're trying to answer, trust your heart. You always do the right thing when you follow your heart. After hanging up, Lewis felt marginally better, but Arya's question still haunted him. He pulled up his laptop and started researching. He found articles about child prodigies, about terminal illness, about the psychology of facing death at a young age. He read testimonials from parents who had lost children, from siblings who had watched their brothers and sisters die. One article made him stop scrolling. It was written by a mother whose daughter had died from cancer at age 10. The title read, "She asked me if her life mattered." Lewis read every word. "My daughter Emma was 9 when she asked me, 'Mommy, if I only live to be 10, will my life have mattered?' I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a child that life isn't measured in years but in impact? That her smile mattered, her kindness mattered, her existence mattered? I told her this. A life isn't worth more because it's longer. It's worth more because it's lived fully. Some people live to be 90 and never truly live at all. You've lived more in 9 years than most people do in a lifetime." She thought about this for a long time. Then she said, "Then I don't want to spend my last year being scared. I want to spend it being brave." And she did. Emma lived the most vibrant, fearless, beautiful year of her life. She tried everything. She asked every question. She loved without holding back. When she died complete. Lewis wiped his eyes. The article continued, but he couldn't read anymore. His vision was too blurred with tears. He understood now. He understood what Arya was really asking. She wasn't asking if his career was worth other people's sacrifices. She was asking if her life, her short, brilliant, doomed life, was worth living fully. She was asking if it was okay to choose quality over quantity, meaning over duration. She was asking permission to be brave. Lewis looked at his phone. It was almost 2 in the morning, too late to call Marcus, too late to do anything productive. But he sent a text anyway. "I need everything you can find about Arya Winters. Medical history, family situation, everything. First thing tomorrow morning." The response came back surprisingly fast, already on it. "I'll have a file ready by 7 a.m. Lewis set his phone down and lay back on the bed. Sleep felt impossible, but he closed his eyes anyway. In his mind, he saw Arya's face. Those amber eyes, so serious and knowing. That medical bracelet glinting in the light. That question hanging in the air between them like smoke. Would you do it? He still didn't know his answer, but he was starting to understand why the question mattered so much. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting to live longer. It's fighting to live better, to live true. And sometimes love means letting someone make their own choice, even when that choice breaks your heart. Lewis finally drifted off to sleep around 3 in the morning, and he dreamed of amber eyes and impossible questions and a little girl who was braver than any race car driver he had ever known. When he woke at dawn, the first thought in his mind wasn't about the upcoming race. It wasn't about championship points or team strategy or lap times. It was about a girl named Arya Winters who had asked him a question he couldn't answer. And he realized, maybe she hadn't been looking for his answer at all. Maybe she had been looking for his understanding. At precisely 7 o'clock, Marcus knocked on Lewis's hotel room door with a thick folder in his hands and a grim expression on his face. "You're not going to like what's in here," Marcus warned. Lewis took the folder and opened it. Medical records, school reports, newspaper clippings about a car accident, details about Arya's parents' deaths, and at the very bottom, a printout of an email. It was from a clinic in Switzerland, an experimental treatment program for Batten disease patients. The email was addressed to Alina Winters and dated just 3 days ago. "Dear Mrs. Winters, this is our final request for confirmation regarding Arya's enrollment in the treatment program. We must have her decision by Monday, June 12th. After that date, her spot will be given to another patient. Please understand that while the treatment is experimental and carries significant risks, it represents Arya's only chance at extending her life expectancy. Without intervention, her condition will continue to deteriorate. We await your response." Lewis looked at the date. Today was Sunday, June 11th. Arya had less than 24 hours to make her decision, and somehow Lewis knew that's why she had come to ask him her question. She was trying to decide between living longer and living fully, and she had no idea which choice was right. "Marcus," Lewis said quietly, closing the folder, "clear my schedule for today. I need to see Arya again." "Lewis, you have team meetings, sponsor commitments." Clear it, Lewis repeated, his voice firm. This matters more than any of that. This child is trying to make an impossible decision, and somehow I'm part of it. I need to help her find her answer. Marcus studied Lewis's face, then nodded slowly. I'll make it happen. Lewis looked out the window at the rising sun, golden light spreading across the Silverstone track. Somewhere in Devon, a little girl with a 220 IQ was sitting in her grandmother's cottage, trying to decide if she should fight for more years of life or embrace the time she had left. And Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, one of the greatest drivers in history, realized that this was the most important race he had ever been asked to run, not a race against other drivers. Race against time, death, and the impossible weight of an 11-year-old girl's choice. The morning fog clung to the Devon countryside like a gray blanket. Lewis's car wound through narrow roads lined with stone walls and hedgerows. He had left London before sunrise, driving himself instead of having his driver take him. He needed the time alone to think. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, GPS directions glowing on his phone. Turn left in half a mile. The cottage should be just past the old church. Lewis gripped the steering wheel tighter. He still didn't know exactly what he was going to say to Arya. He just knew he had to see her, had to try to help somehow. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked quietly. You're missing 3 important meetings. The team is going to be upset. Let them be upset, Lewis said. This is more important. The cottage appeared around a bend in the road. It was small and old, with a thatched roof and ivy climbing up the walls. Roses grew wild in the front garden. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the summer warmth. Lewis parked on the narrow street and sat for a moment, staring at the front door. Want me to come with you? Marcus offered. No, I should do this alone. Lewis took a deep breath and got out of the car. The morning air smelled like grass and flowers. Birds sang in the trees. It was peaceful here, far from the noise and speed of the racing world. Lewis could understand why Arya's grandmother had chosen this place. He walked up the stone path and knocked on the wooden door. It was painted blue, the paint peeling in places. A wind chime made of seashells tinkled softly in the breeze. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Alina Winters stood there in a cardigan and apron, her silver hair pulled back. Her eyes were red and puffy like she had been crying. When she saw Lewis, her mouth fell open in shock. Mr. Hamilton, what are you doing here? I'm sorry to show up unannounced, Mrs. Winters. I know this is strange, but I need to speak with Arya, please. Alina's hand flew to her throat. How did you find us? I didn't give anyone our address. I have resources, Lewis admitted. I'm sorry if that feels invasive, but your granddaughter asked me a question yesterday and I can't stop thinking about it. I think she needs to talk about it more. Alina's eyes filled with tears. She glanced back into the house, then stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. Mr. Hamilton, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But Arya is. She's going through something very difficult right now. She has to make a decision about her treatment, and I'm afraid that seeing you might confuse things even more. I know about the treatment, Lewis said gently. I know about the deadline, that's why I'm here. Alina stared at him. You know. My assistant did some research. I'm sorry if that feels like an invasion of privacy, but... She's going to refuse it, Alina interrupted, her voice breaking. The treatment, she's going to say no, I can feel it. She's made up her mind to just give up and die, and I don't know how to stop her. Tears streamed down Alina's face. Lewis felt his own chest tighten with emotion. Mrs. Winters, I don't think Arya is giving up. I think she's trying to make an impossible choice, and she doesn't have anyone who understands what she's asking. And you do. Alina's voice was sharp with grief and frustration. You're a race car driver. What do you know about dying at 11 years old? Lewis met her eyes steadily. I know about making choices that other people don't understand. I know about sacrifice. And I know what it's like to love something so much that you're willing to risk everything for it. He paused. But more importantly, I know what it's like to be told what you should do when nobody really understands what you need. Alina wiped her eyes with a tissue from her pocket. She studied Lewis's face for a long moment. She asked you that question for a reason, Alina said finally. She's been obsessed with you for weeks, reading about you, watching your races, studying your life. I thought it was just a phase, something to distract her from the treatment decision. But now. Now what? Now I think she sees something in you, some kind of answer she's looking for. Alina took a shaky breath. Come in. But please, Mr. Hamilton, don't tell her what to do. Don't push her toward the treatment just because that's what I want. She's so brilliant and she trusts so few people. If you break that trust. I won't, Lewis promised. I just want to help her find her own answer. Alina opened the door wider and led Lewis inside. The cottage was exactly what Lewis had imagined. Low ceilings with dark wooden beams, a fireplace with stones blackened by decades of fires, comfortable furniture that looked worn and loved, and books everywhere. They were stacked on every surface, the coffee table, the windowsills, the floor, textbooks on physics and philosophy, novels in multiple languages, medical journals, mathematical theory. The walls were lined with overflowing bookshelves. She reads constantly, Alina said, noticing Lewis looking around. Sometimes 3 or 4 books a day. She says reading helps her understand the world since she won't be here long enough to experience most of it. Lewis's heart ached. Alina led him through the small living room to an even smaller back room. She knocked softly on the door. Arya, sweetheart, you have a visitor. I'm busy, Grandma, came a voice from inside. It was Arya's voice, but it sounded tired, defeated. I think you'll want to see this visitor, dear. Silence, then footsteps. The door opened. Arya stood there in an oversized sweater and pajama pants. Her auburn hair was down, falling past her shoulders in messy waves. She looked smaller than she had yesterday, more fragile. But those amber eyes were still sharp, still seeing everything. When she saw Lewis, she didn't gasp or scream or show any surprise at all. She just looked at him calmly and said, Mr. Hamilton, I wondered if you'd come. You knew I would. I suspected. You have that look in your eyes, the same look my father used to get when he was trying to solve a problem he didn't fully understand yet. Arya stepped back from the door. You can come in. Lewis looked at Alina, who nodded. He stepped into Arya's room. It was like entering a different world. The walls were covered with papers, equations, diagrams, philosophical questions written in neat handwriting. String connected different ideas like a detective's investigation board. Books were stacked in towers that reached nearly to the ceiling. A desk by the window was covered with notebooks, all filled with Arya's thoughts. But what caught Lewis's attention most was the opposite wall. It was covered with photographs and newspaper clippings, pictures of Lewis racing, articles about his championships, but also pictures of his family, his father, his mother, his brother Nicholas, articles about Mission 44 and Lewis's activism work. Everything was annotated in the margins with Arya's handwriting, observations and questions about choices and sacrifice. I've been studying you, Arya said simply, noticing where Lewis was looking. I hope that's not creepy. I was trying to understand something. What were you trying to understand? Lewis asked gently. Arya sat down on her bed, pulling her knees up to her chest. She looked even smaller like that, like a child half her age. Whether people who sacrifice for their dreams ever regret it, whether the people they love resent them for it, whether a life spent chasing something you love is better than a life spent safe and careful. She looked up at Lewis. Whether it's selfish to choose your own path when other people want you to choose differently. Lewis slowly sat down in the desk chair, careful not to disturb the piles of books. That's what your question was really about yesterday, wasn't it? You weren't just asking about me. You were asking about yourself. Arya nodded. The treatment program in Switzerland, my grandmother told you about it. I found out, yes. She wants me to do it so badly. She cries every night thinking I'm going to refuse. She says every extra day of life is precious, and I'm throwing away years for nothing. Arya's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. But the treatment means 6 months in isolation. 6 months of tests and surgeries and being so sick I can barely think. And there's only a 30% chance it will even work. And if it works, Lewis asked quietly, 5 to 10 more years maybe, but years spent always wondering when the disease will come back. Years spent in and out of hospitals. Years spent afraid. Arya hugged her knees tighter. Is that living, Mr. Hamilton, or is that just existing? Lewis took a deep breath. He thought about his conversation with his father last night, about what Anthony had said. Arya, can I ask you something? Yes. What do you want to do with your time? However much time you have, what do you want to do with it? Arya's face changed. For the first time since Lewis had entered the room, her eyes lit up with something like hope. I want to matter, she said, her voice stronger now. I have all this intelligence, this IQ of 220 that everyone talks about like it's some amazing gift. But what's the point of being smart if I die before I can do anything with it? That's what keeps me awake at night, Mr. Hamilton. Not the dying itself, but the waste of it all. What if it doesn't have to be a waste? Lewis said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. What if there's a way to make your intelligence matter, even in the time you have left? Arya looked at him with those intense amber eyes. What do you mean? Lewis leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. You asked me yesterday if I would give up racing to save someone I love. I've been thinking about that question all night, and I realized something. I can't answer it because it's asking me to choose between two things that both matter. Racing and family, Arya said. Right, but here's what I learned. You can't live someone else's life for them. My father can't race for me. I can't make my brother walk. And you? Lewis paused, choosing his words carefully. You can't live your life the way your grandmother wants you to, just to make her happy. You have to live it the way that's true to you. Tears finally spilled down Arya's cheeks. But choosing myself feels so selfish. She's already lost her daughter, my mother. If I refuse the treatment and die, I'm choosing to leave her alone. How is that okay? It's not about okay or not okay, Lewis said gently. It's about what you can live with. Arya, if you take that treatment and spend 6 months in isolation, can you live with that? Can you be yourself in a hospital room, cut off from everything and everyone? Arya shook her head. I've read about sensory deprivation, about what isolation does to the human mind. I already feel so alone in my own brain. Nobody understands how I think, what I see, what I need. 6 months of that, but worse. Her voice cracked. I think it would break me. I think I would come out of that treatment if I survived it at all as someone different, someone hollowed out. Then that's not really living, is it? Lewis said. That's surviving, there's a difference. Arya wiped her eyes. My grandmother doesn't see it that way. She thinks I'm just scared. She thinks I'm giving up. Lewis stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Devon countryside stretched green and beautiful under the morning sun. He could hear Alina moving around in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the whistle of a kettle. Arya, he said, turning back to her, I'm going to tell you something and I need you to really hear it. Can you do that? She nodded. You're not giving up, you're making a choice. And that choice takes more courage than any race I've ever driven, any championship I've ever won. Because you're choosing to live really live for the time you have left. That's not selfish. That's brave. Arya stared at him, fresh tears streaming down her face. But what do I do? How do I make my life matter in 18 months? How do I make it count? Lewis felt something click into place in his mind. An idea, a plan, something that might give this brilliant, dying child exactly what she needed. What if, he said slowly, I could show you? What if I could give you 2 weeks to really live, to see what it means to make your life matter, and then you can make your final decision about the treatment? But you have to promise me something. What? You promise that whatever you decide, it will be your choice. Not what your grandmother wants, not what I think, not what anyone else believes is right. Your choice based on what's true to you. Can you promise me that? Arya stood up from her bed. She was so small, so thin, the medical bracelet sliding down her wrist, but her voice was strong when she spoke. I promise, but Mr. Hamilton, why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Lewis smiled sadly. Because yesterday you asked me a question that changed how I see everything. You made me think about what really matters. Let me return the favor. Let me help you find your answer. Arya walked over to him and, to Lewis's surprise, reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold and small in his. Okay, she said simply. Show me how to live. From the doorway, Alina Winters watched them, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if this was the right thing. She didn't know if Lewis Hamilton could really help her dying granddaughter find peace with an impossible choice. But she knew one thing. For the first time in months, she saw hope in Arya's eyes. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth everything. Day 1, Monday morning. Lewis's private car pulled up to the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team headquarters in Brackley at 9 o'clock sharp. Arya sat in the back seat beside him, her eyes wide as she stared at the massive modern building with its glass walls and sleek design. "This is where the magic happens," Lewis said, opening the car door for her. "This is where dreams become reality." Elinor had agreed to let Arya go, though not without tears and worry. Lewis had promised to take care of her granddaughter, to keep her safe, to bring her back each evening. He had 2 weeks before the next race, 2 weeks to show Arya what a meaningful life looked like, 2 weeks to help her make the most important decision of her short life. Inside the headquarters, the team members stopped and stared as Lewis walked through with a small girl at his side. Some recognized her from the meet and greet. Others just saw a child who clearly didn't belong in this world of high-performance engineering and million-pound racing machines. "Everyone," Lewis called out, his voice carrying across the main floor. "This is Arya Winters. She's brilliant, probably smarter than all of us combined. And for the next 2 weeks, she's going to be learning about what we do here. I want you to treat her like part of the team." A tall woman with short dark hair and grease-stained coveralls stepped forward. "I'm Sarah Chen, lead engineer. Nice to meet you, Arya." Arya shook her hand solemnly. "Nice to meet you too, Ms. Chen. Can you explain the aerodynamic principles that allow the car to maintain downforce at high speeds while minimizing drag?" Sarah blinked, then she grinned. "Oh, I like you already. Come on, let me show you the wind tunnel." For the next 4 hours, Arya was in heaven. She asked questions that stumped senior engineers. She understood complex mathematical formulas on the first explanation. She looked at design schematics and immediately spotted inefficiencies that the team had been struggling with for weeks. "What if you adjusted the angle of the rear wing by 0.3 degrees, she suggested, pointing at a computer screen showing airflow simulations. "It would create a vortex here that might reduce drag by approximately 2%. The engineer at the computer stared at her. "How old are you?" 11. "Does that matter?" "Not if you're right." He ran the simulation with Arya's suggestion. The numbers came back positive. He looked at Arya with newfound respect. "You just solved a problem we've been working on for 3 weeks." Arya smiled, a real, genuine smile that made her whole face light up. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about death or treatment decisions. She was thinking about vortexes and drag coefficients and the pure joy of problem-solving. Lewis watched from across the room, his heart swelling. This was what Arya needed. Not pity, not sadness, but challenge, purpose. The chance to use her brilliant mind for something real. At lunch, they sat in the team cafeteria. Arya picked at her sandwich, not eating much. Lewis noticed but didn't push. He knew the disease affected her appetite. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. "Alive," Arya said simply. "For the first time in forever, I feel alive. My brain was hungry, Mr. Hamilton, starving, and nobody understood that." "Call me Lewis, and I think I understand now. Your intelligence isn't just what you have, it's who you are. Keeping you from using it is like keeping me from racing." "Exactly." Arya looked at him with those amber eyes. "That's why the treatment scares me so much. 6 months of not being able to think clearly, not being able to learn, not being able to be myself. It feels like dying twice." Lewis nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand the weight of Arya's choice. Day 2, Tuesday. They spent the morning at the Mercedes factory in Brixworth, where the engines were built. Arya stood mesmerized as engineers explained combustion efficiency, fuel injection systems, and hybrid power units. "The thermal efficiency is remarkable," she said, studying a cutaway engine model. "You're extracting more power from each unit of fuel than most road cars could dream of." An older engineer named Robert laughed. "You know, Arya, we have university graduates who don't grasp these concepts as quickly as you do." "That's because they're learning it as information," Arya replied. "I'm learning it as truth. There's a difference." In the afternoon, Lewis took Arya to meet the mechanics who actually built and maintained the race cars. These were the people who worked through the night before every race, who fixed problems in seconds during pit stops, who made split-second decisions that could win or lose championships. A mechanic named James showed Arya how to change a tire on an F1 car. "Speed matters," he explained. "Every tenth of a second counts." Arya watched intently, memorizing every movement. It's like a dance, she observed. Everyone has to move in perfect harmony or the whole thing falls apart. That's exactly right, James said, impressed. This girl gets it, Lewis. During a quiet moment, Arya turned to Lewis. These people aren't famous. Nobody knows their names, but they're part of something important. They matter. Yes, Lewis agreed. That's what I wanted you to see. Meaning isn't about being the smartest person in the room or the most famous. It's about what you contribute, how you make things better, how you help others achieve something great. Arya was quiet for a long time, thinking. Her fingers unconsciously traced the edge of her medical bracelet. I used to think my IQ made me special, she said finally. But it doesn't, does it? What makes someone special is what they do with what they have. Now you're getting it, Lewis said with a smile. Day 3, Wednesday morning. Lewis took Arya to his home to meet Nicholas. His brother was waiting in the living room, his wheelchair positioned by the large windows overlooking the garden. When Arya walked in, Nicholas grinned widely. So you're the girl who asked my brother the impossible question, he said. I'm Nicholas. Nice to meet you. Arya studied him carefully, the way she studied everything. You have cerebral palsy. I do, doesn't slow me down though. Well, literally it does, but you know what I mean. Arya surprised everyone by laughing. It was a soft sound like she was out of practice, but genuine. Lewis left them alone, making tea in the kitchen where he could still hear their conversation. Does it bother you? Arya asked Nicholas. That Lewis can do things you can't. Sometimes, Nicholas admitted. Not gonna lie, there are moments when I watch him race and think, man, I wish that was me. But mostly, I'm just proud of him. Even though he's gone a lot, even though racing takes him away from you. Nicholas tilted his head, studying Arya. You're asking about sacrifice, aren't you? About whether the people who love someone resent what that person chooses to do with their life. Yes. Here's the truth, Arya. I don't resent Lewis for racing. I'd resent him if he gave up racing because of me. Because then his sacrifice wouldn't be about love, it would be about pity. And I don't need pity. I need to be seen as a whole person who can handle his brother having an amazing life. Arya's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother wants me to take a treatment that might give me more years, but those years they wouldn't be me. They'd be a version of me that's scared and sick and not really living. And I think if I choose differently, she'll never forgive me. Nicholas wheeled closer to her. Can I tell you something? The people who really love you want you to be happy, not just alive. There's a difference. If your grandmother really sees you, really understands you, she'll support whatever choice you make. And if she doesn't, then you still have to choose yourself, Nicholas said gently. Because you're the one who has to live with your choice, or die with it. Nobody else can do that for you. Arya wiped her eyes. You're very wise. Now I just have a lot of time to think, Nicholas smiled. Plus, having a superstar brother teaches you that life isn't about comparing yourself to others. It's about being the best version of yourself, whatever that looks like. Day 3, Wednesday afternoon. That evening back at Aliner's cottage, Arya was quieter than usual. She sat by her window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lewis had stayed for dinner at Aliner's invitation. Now he sat in the small living room with both of them, drinking tea from delicate china cups. How was your day, sweetheart? Aliner asked, her voice tentative. She had been walking on eggshells since Lewis had arrived, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of pushing Arya toward or away from the treatment. It was good, Grandma, Arya said. I learned a lot. And, Aliner pressed gently, has it helped you think about your decision? Arya turned from the window. In the fading light, she looked ethereal, almost ghostly. I'm starting to understand something. I thought my choice was between living longer or living fully, but maybe it's really about understanding what living means in the first place. Aliner looked confused. Lewis nodded encouragingly. Everyone keeps telling me that more time is always better, Arya continued. But what if that's not true? What if the quality of time matters more than the quantity? What if 18 months of really living is worth more than 10 years of just surviving? Aliner's cup rattled in its saucer. But darling, You don't know that the treatment would be just surviving. It might work. You might get those extra years and be perfectly happy. At a 30% success rate, Arya said quietly. And even if it works, I'd spend the rest of my life afraid it would stop working, afraid the disease would come back. Is that living, Grandma? Or is that just a different kind of dying? Elinor set down her cup and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Arya went to her grandmother and wrapped her thin arms around her. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to figure out what's right for me. I know, Elinor choked out. I know, sweetheart, I can't lose you. Not after losing your mother, I can't. You're going to lose me either way, Arya said, her voice breaking. The only question is when and how, and I need to choose the how part. Please let me choose. Louis felt like an intruder on this private moment of grief, but he also knew his presence mattered. He was the neutral party, the person who could see both sides without the blinding pain of family love. Mrs. Winters, he said gently, can I share something my father told me? Elinor looked up, her face streaked with tears. He said that when you love someone, you fight for them, you sacrifice for them, but you can't live their life for them. The hardest part of love is letting people make their own choices, even when those choices break your heart. But she's 11, Elinor whispered. How can an 11-year-old make a choice like this? Because she's not really 11, Louis said. Not in the ways that matter. Her mind is extraordinary. She understands things most adults never grasp. And more than that, she's the one who has to live with the consequences of this choice. Not you, not me, her. Elinor closed her eyes. Fresh tears leaked out. I know you're right, I know it, but knowing doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy, Arya said, still holding her grandmother. Love isn't supposed to be easy, but it is supposed to be real. And the real truth is that I'm scared of the treatment, Grandma, not scared of dying, scared of losing myself before I die. They sat together in the darkening room, three people bound by impossible circumstances, trying to navigate love and death and choice. Finally, Elinor spoke. Finish your 2 weeks with Louis, see everything he wants to show you, then make your choice. And whatever you decide, I'll support you, I promise. Arya hugged her grandmother tighter. Thank you. Louis stood to leave, sensing they needed time alone, but as he reached the door, Arya called out to him, Louis. He turned. Thank you for understanding what I need, not what people think I need, what I actually need. Louis smiled, though his eyes were wet. That's what this 2 weeks is about, Arya, helping you understand what you need. Tomorrow, I want to show you something different, not engineering or racing, something about people. What? You'll see, Louis said. Get some rest, we have a big day ahead. As he drove back to London that night, Louis thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 days. Arya was beginning to understand her choice, but he knew the hardest part was still coming, because understanding what you need and having the courage to choose it are two very different things, especially when choosing yourself means breaking the heart of someone you love. Day 4, Thursday. Louis picked up Arya early in the morning. Today they weren't going to a factory or headquarters. Today was about people. Their first stop was a small primary school in South London. The building was old, with cracked paint and a playground that had seen better days. But when Louis walked through the doors with Arya, the hallway exploded with excitement. It's Lewis Hamilton, children screamed, running toward them. A teacher quickly restored order, but the energy remained electric. Louis had arranged this visit days ago, calling in a favor from a teacher he had met through Mission 44. Class, settle down, said Mrs. Thompson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair. Mr. Hamilton is here today with his friend Arya to talk to you about dreams and choices. Louis spoke to the children for 20 minutes about never giving up, about believing in yourself, about working hard. But then he did something unexpected. He turned to Arya. I'd like my friend Arya to talk to you now. She's only 11, but she's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and she has something important to share. Arya looked startled. Me, talk to them. Yes, tell them what you've been learning, about what makes a life meaningful. Arya stood slowly. 30 pairs of young eyes watched her. She walked to the front of the classroom, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment she just stood there silent. Then she began to speak. I'm dying, she said simply. The classroom went completely silent. Even the teacher looked shocked. I have a disease that's killing me. I probably have about 18 months left to live, maybe less. Some of the younger children gasped. Others looked at their teacher, confused and scared. I'm telling you this not to make you sad, Arya continued, her voice growing stronger, but because I've learned something important. Life isn't about how long you live. It's about what you do with the time you have. She looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some of you will live to be 90 years old. Some of you might not. But it doesn't matter how many years you get. What matters is whether you spend those years being true to yourself, whether you choose courage over fear, whether you make your life mean something. A small boy raised his hand. But how do you make your life mean something? Arya smiled. That's the question I've been trying to answer. And here's what I've learned from Lewis and his team. You make your life mean something by helping others, by using whatever gifts you have, intelligence, kindness, creativity, anything, to make the world a little bit better. Are you scared? Asked a girl with braids. Every day, Arya admitted. I'm terrified, but being scared doesn't mean I have to stop living. It just means I have to be brave enough to live anyway. When they left the school an hour later, Arya was crying quietly in the car. Why are you crying? Lewis asked gently. Because those children listened to me. They actually heard what I was saying. And for a few minutes, I wasn't just a dying girl with a high IQ. I was someone who had something valuable to share. She wiped her eyes. That's what meaning feels like, isn't it? Being valuable to someone else. Yes, Lewis said. That's exactly what it feels like. Day 5, Friday. They spent Friday at a children's hospital in London. Lewis had been a regular visitor for years, but today he brought Arya with him. They walked through the cancer ward, meeting children who were fighting their own battles with illness. Some were much younger than Arya. Some were older. All of them were warriors in their own way. A boy named Mason, age 9, was bald from chemotherapy. He grinned when he saw Lewis. You came back. I promised I would, Lewis said, sitting beside Mason's bed. And I brought someone special. This is Arya. She's brilliant, probably smarter than me. That's not hard, Mason joked weakly. Arya sat on the other side of Mason's bed. She looked at the IV in his arm, the monitors beeping beside him, the medical equipment that was keeping him alive. She understood all of it, the cancer, the treatment, the odds. What kind of cancer? She asked quietly. Leukemia, but I'm beating it. The doctors say I'm responding well to treatment. Mason flexed his thin arm. I'm going to be a footballer when I grow up, like my dad. That's a good dream, Arya said. What's your dream? Mason asked. Arya was quiet for a moment. I dream about making something that lasts longer than I do, something that helps people even after I'm gone. Mason looked at her with sudden understanding. You're sick too, aren't you? Yes. Are you going to die? The blunt question hung in the air. Lewis tensed, ready to intervene, but Arya answered calmly. Yes, probably soon. Does it hurt? Sometimes, not always. Mostly it just makes me tired. Mason nodded slowly. I get tired too. Sometimes I sleep for days, but then I wake up and I'm still here, and that's pretty cool. They talked for another 15 minutes about football, about books, about what it felt like to be sick when everyone else was healthy. When they finally left, Mason called out to Arya. Hey, Arya. She turned. I hope you make your thing, the thing that lasts. You seem like someone who should leave something behind. Arya smiled through tears. Thank you, Mason. I hope you become a footballer. In the hallway, Arya stopped walking. She leaned against the wall, her whole body shaking. That boy is fighting so hard to live, she whispered. And I'm choosing not to fight. Does that make me a coward? Lewis knelt in front of her. No, it makes you honest. Mason wants to fight because fighting gives him hope. But fighting isn't the only kind of bravery, Arya. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept the truth and choose how you want to spend your remaining time. But what if I'm wrong? What if I take the treatment and it works and I get 10 more years? And what if you take the treatment and it doesn't work? What if you spend your last 6 months suffering in isolation and you die anyway? Lewis took her hands gently. There is no right answer here, Arya. There's only your answer, the one that lets you live or die with peace. They visited 6 more children that day, each one fighting. each one hoping, each one believing that tomorrow would be better than today. By the end, Arya was exhausted physically and emotionally, but something had shifted in her eyes, a new understanding, a new clarity. Day 6, Saturday. Saturday was quiet. Lewis took Arya to Kew Gardens where they walked among ancient trees and flowers from around the world. They didn't talk much. They just walked, surrounded by life. In the greenhouse filled with tropical plants, Arya finally spoke. "I've been thinking about Mason, about all those children at the hospital. They're fighting because they want to live, because they believe life is worth fighting for." "Yes, but I'm not like them, am I? I don't want to fight, I want to accept. Does that make me different, wrong?" Lewis stopped walking. They stood beside a massive palm tree, its fronds stretching toward the glass ceiling far above. "This tree," Lewis said, touching the trunk, "has been here for over 200 years. It survived storms, droughts, diseases. It fought to live every single day." "Yes, but eventually even this tree will die. And when it does, it won't fight. It will simply fall. And its death will feed the soil, giving life to new trees. Death isn't failure, Arya. It's just the end of one story and the beginning of others." Arya looked up at the massive tree. "You're saying I should accept my death?" "I'm saying you should decide what kind of story you want to tell. Mason wants to tell a story about fighting. That's beautiful. That's his story. But maybe your story is different. Maybe your story is about acceptance, wisdom, and making peace with a short life fully lived." "But my grandmother..." "Your grandmother wants you to fight because watching you die without fighting breaks her heart. But she's not the one who has to live your life, Arya. You are." Arya sat down on a bench. She looked small and tired in the vast greenhouse, surrounded by all this thriving life. "I think I've made my decision," she said quietly. Lewis sat beside her, his heart racing. "Tell me." "I'm not going to take the treatment. I'm going to refuse it." She looked at him, her amber eyes clear and certain. "I'm going to spend my remaining time really living, creating something that matters, being myself fully without fear, without compromise. I'm going to make my short life count for something." Lewis felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Are you sure?" "No, I'm terrified, but I'm sure that this is my choice and I can live and die with it." She paused. "But I need help, Lewis. I need help making it count. I can't just sit in my grandmother's cottage reading books until I die. I need to do something important." "What do you want to do?" Arya turned to face him fully. "I want to write a book for kids like me, kids who are sick, kids who are different, kids who are scared. I want to tell them what I've learned about making a short life meaningful. I want to answer all the questions I've been asking." Lewis felt something powerful surge through him. This was it. This was what Arya needed. Not more time, not more treatments, but purpose, legacy. A way to transform her brilliant, brief life into something that would outlast her. "Then we'll write it together," Lewis said. "I'll help you. I'll connect you with editors, publishers, writers. We'll make sure your voice is heard. We'll make sure you matter." Arya started crying, not sad tears, relieved tears, the tears of someone who has finally found their answer. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding." They sat together in the greenhouse for another hour, planning, dreaming, imagining a book that would help thousands of children understand that life's value isn't measured in years but in meaning. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the glass ceiling, Arya said something that would stay with Lewis forever. "My parents chose to give me a rich life instead of a long one, and I used to resent that choice when they died. But now I understand. They were showing me that how you live matters more than how long you live, and I'm going to honor their choice by making the same one." Day 7, Sunday. Sunday was the hardest day, the day Arya had to tell Alina. They sat together in the cottage living room, Arya, Alina, and Lewis. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Outside, birds sang. Inside, time seemed to stand still. "Grandma," Arya began, her voice shaking but determined. "I've made my decision about the treatment." Alina's hands gripped the arms of her chair. "Tell me." "I'm not going to do it. I'm going to refuse the treatment." Alina closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. But she didn't argue, she didn't beg. She had promised to support Arya's choice, and she was keeping that promise even though it was destroying her. "Can you tell me why?" Alina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Arya moved to kneel in front of her grandmother, taking her hands. Because the treatment would mean 6 months of not being myself. 6 months of suffering for a 30% chance at a few more years of fear. And I've learned something these past weeks, Grandma. I've learned that I'd rather have 18 months of really living than 10 years of just surviving. But you're giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm choosing. I'm choosing to spend my remaining time writing a book that will help other kids like me. I'm choosing to make my intelligence mean something. I'm choosing to live fully instead of fearfully. Elinor sobbed openly now. I just wanted more time with you. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that my choice hurts you. But Grandma, you taught me to be brave. You taught me to think for myself. You can't ask me to do that and then be angry when I choose something you don't agree with. Elinor pulled Arya into her arms, holding her granddaughter like she would never let go. I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken, but I'm also proud of you. So proud. They cried together for a long time. Louis sat quietly, giving them space but bearing witness to this moment of love and grief and acceptance. Finally, Elinor pulled back and looked at Arya's tear-stained face. Tell me about this book. Arya's eyes lit up. It's going to be called Questions for a Short Forever. It's going to help kids understand that their lives matter, even if they're short. That meaning isn't about duration, it's about impact. That being brave means choosing your own path, even when it's hard. It sounds beautiful, Elinor said, wiping her eyes. Your parents would be so proud. Do you think they'd understand my choice? Elinor smiled sadly. Darling, your parents made the same choice for you. They chose quality over quantity. They chose to give you a beautiful life instead of a long, painful one. Of course they'd understand. They'd probably tell you this is exactly what they hoped you'd learn. Arya hugged her grandmother again. I love you, Grandma, and I'm going to make every remaining day count. I promise. I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will. Louis drove home that evening with a heavy heart but also a sense of rightness. Arya had made her choice, the hardest choice anyone could make, and she had done it with courage, clarity, and grace. Tomorrow they would begin the next phase, the creative phase, the phase where Arya's brilliant mind would create something that would outlast her body. Tomorrow they would begin writing the book that would become Arya's legacy. But tonight Louis called his father. She made her choice, he told Anthony. She's refusing the treatment. She's going to write a book instead. How do you feel about it? Anthony asked. I think she's the bravest person I've ever met, Louis said, his voice thick with emotion. She's 11 years old and she's teaching me what courage really means. Then you did good, son. You helped her find her answer. No, Dad, she helped me find mine. Louis looked out his window at the London skyline. She asked me if I would give up racing to save someone I love, and I finally know the answer. What is it? The answer is that you can't save someone by making their choices for them. You save them by loving them enough to let them choose their own path, even when that path breaks your heart. Anthony was quiet for a moment. That's wisdom, Louis, real wisdom. As Louis lay in bed that night, he thought about the past week, about Arya's transformation from a scared, confused child to someone who knew exactly what she wanted, about Elinor's heartbreak and courage, about the choice that would define Arya's final months, and he thought about his own life, his own choices, his own understanding of what really mattered. Arya had asked him a question that seemed impossible to answer, but in helping her find her answer, he had found his own. Love means letting people be free, even when that freedom leads them to places you can't follow, even when that freedom means goodbye. That was the answer to her question. That was always the answer. Week 2, Monday morning. Louis arrived at Elinor's cottage with something special. He carried a brand new laptop still in its box and a bag full of notebooks, pens, and recording equipment. What's all this? Arya asked, meeting him at the door. She looked tired, darker circles under her eyes, her movement slower, but her amber eyes were bright with curiosity. This is how we start, Louis said, setting everything on the kitchen table. Your book, your legacy, your voice. Elinor made tea while Louis set up the laptop. He had already contacted 3 publishers who were interested in Arya's story. He had reached out to a professional writer named Catherine Mills who specialized in helping people tell their stories. and he had cleared his entire schedule for the next week to help Arya begin this journey. "I don't know where to start," Arya admitted, staring at the blank laptop screen. "I have so many thoughts, so many questions. How do I organize them into something that makes sense?" Catherine arrived an hour later. She was a woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and ink-stained fingers. She had written 12 books and helped dozens of others tell their stories. "Arya," Catherine said, sitting across from her at the table, "let's start simple. Why do you want to write this book?" "Because I'm going to die soon, and I don't want to disappear without leaving something behind. I want to help other kids who are scared or sick or different. I want them to know that their lives matter, even if they're short." Catherine nodded. "That's perfect, that's your purpose. Now what do you want to tell them?" Arya thought for a moment. "I want to tell them that meaning isn't about how long you live. It's about how fully you live. I want to tell them that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means choosing to live anyway. I want to tell them that they have the right to make their own choices, even when those choices are hard." "Then that's what we'll write," Catherine said. She opened her own notebook. "Let's start with an outline. What are the main ideas you want to explore?" For the next 4 hours, they worked together. Arya talked, and Catherine helped her organize her thoughts into chapters and themes. Lewis sat nearby, occasionally offering suggestions, mostly just watching Arya's brilliant mind turn abstract ideas into concrete structure. By lunchtime, they had an outline. Chapter 1. Why smart isn't enough about intelligence versus wisdom, and how Arya learned that her IQ didn't give her all the answers. Chapter 2. The difference between time and life, about quality versus quantity, and how more years don't always mean more meaning. Chapter 3. Loving people who will lose you, about relationships when you know the ending, and how to love without fear. Chapter 4. Choosing your own story, about making decisions that are true to yourself, even when others disagree. Chapter 5. Questions that matter, about asking the right questions instead of looking for easy answers. Chapter 6. Legacy and impact, about what we leave behind when we're gone. Chapter 7. Being brave when you're scared, about courage in the face of death. Chapter 8. The answer, the final chapter where Arya would share what she had learned. Arya stared at the outline, tears streaming down her face. "It's real. We're really doing this." "We're really doing this," Lewis confirmed. "And I'm going to help you every step of the way." Week 2, Tuesday through Thursday. The next 3 days blurred together in a storm of writing, thinking, and creating. Arya worked from early morning until she was too exhausted to continue, usually by mid-afternoon. The disease was progressing. Her hands trembled more. Her words sometimes came out slurred, but her mind remained sharp, brilliant, relentlessly focused. Catherine came every day, helping Arya shape her thoughts into words that other children could understand. She taught Arya how to write with emotion, how to make abstract concepts concrete, how to tell stories that illustrated her points. Lewis contributed his own experiences. He wrote about his relationship with Nicholas, about the sacrifices his family had made, about the moments when racing felt less important than love. His words would form the foreword to Arya's book. Alina helped too, though it was painful for her. She shared stories about Arya's childhood, about Thomas and Sarah, about the car accident that had changed everything. She cried often while talking, but she never stopped. She understood that this book was how Arya would live on. On Tuesday, Arya wrote the chapter about intelligence versus wisdom. "When I was 5, I could solve calculus problems. When I was 7, I understood quantum physics. But when I was 9, I couldn't understand why my parents had to die." Intelligence doesn't prepare you for the hard questions. It doesn't tell you what matters or how to live. I was the smartest person in every room, but I didn't know anything about being human. That's what I had to learn. On Wednesday, she tackled the chapter about loving people who will lose you. "My grandmother knows I'm going to die. Every time she looks at me, I can see the grief in her eyes. And for a long time, I thought that made loving me a burden for her. But I was wrong. Love isn't a burden just because it ends badly. Love is the point. The joy of loving someone is worth the pain of losing them. I have to believe that, or else my whole life becomes a tragedy instead of a gift." On Thursday, she wrote about choosing your own story, and her hands shook so badly that Lewis had to type while she dictated. The hardest thing I've ever done was tell my grandmother I wasn't taking the treatment. She cried, I cried. We both knew I was choosing to die sooner, but I wasn't choosing death, I was choosing life. My life, the one that felt true to me. And sometimes being true to yourself means breaking the heart of someone you love. That doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it hard. By Thursday evening, Arya was completely exhausted. She lay on the couch in the living room, too tired to even walk upstairs to her bedroom. Alina covered her with a blanket and sat beside her, stroking her hair. How much did we get done? Arya asked weakly. Almost 4 chapters, Lewis said, looking at the laptop. You're writing something extraordinary, Arya. Will anyone read it? Everyone will read it, Catherine said firmly. I've already shown the outline to publishers. They're fighting over who gets to publish it. Your voice matters, Arya. People need to hear what you have to say. Arya smiled faintly. Good, then it's worth it. The tiredness, the pain, all of it, it's worth it if someone learns from my story. Week 2, Friday. Friday was a bad day. Arya woke up with a seizure, her body convulsing while Alina held her and called for an ambulance. Lewis met them at the hospital, pacing in the waiting room while doctors stabilized her. When he was finally allowed to see her, Arya looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines. I'm sorry, she said, her voice weak. I wanted to keep writing. Don't apologize, you need to rest. But we only have 3 more chapters. And I'm running out of time, Lewis. I can feel it. The disease is getting worse. The doctor came in, a young woman with a kind but serious expression. Arya, I need to be honest with you. The seizures are going to become more frequent. Your body is declining faster than we expected. You might have less time than we thought. How much time? Alina asked, her voice breaking. Weeks, maybe a few months, I'm sorry. The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors. Arya stared at the ceiling, processing this new reality. Then we work faster, she said finally. We finish the book, whatever it takes. Arya, you need to rest, the doctor began. I'll rest when I'm dead, Arya interrupted. Her voice was weak but fierce. Right now I need to write. That's the only thing that matters. Lewis looked at the doctor. Can she go home? Against medical advice, yes, but she needs to be monitored. Another seizure could be fatal. I'll stay with her, Alina said. Day and night, I won't leave her side. They brought Arya home that evening. Lewis carried her from the car to the cottage, shocked by how light she had become. She weighed almost nothing, her body consumed by the disease, but her mind was still sharp. Her will was still strong. Tomorrow, she said as Lewis tucked her into bed. Tomorrow we keep writing. Tomorrow you rest. No, tomorrow we write. She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. Please, Lewis, I need to finish this. I need to know that when I die, something of me survives. The book is the only thing that will last. Lewis felt tears burning his eyes. Okay, tomorrow we write. Week 2, Saturday and Sunday. The weekend was a race against time. Catherine came to the cottage, setting up her laptop beside Arya's bed. Lewis sat nearby, ready to help however he could. Alina moved through the house like a ghost, bringing food and medicine, trying not to break down. Arya wrote through the pain and exhaustion. She wrote about legacy, about what we leave behind when we're gone. Used to think legacy meant doing something huge, discovering a cure for cancer, solving an impossible mathematical proof, changing the world. But I've learned that legacy is simpler than that. Legacy is how you make people feel, the kindness you show, the truth you speak, the courage you model. I'm writing this book and maybe it will help people. But my real legacy is the love I shared with my grandmother, the questions I asked Lewis, the moments I was brave when I was scared. That's what will last. She wrote about being brave when you're scared. Every single day I wake up afraid. Afraid of pain, afraid of saying goodbye, afraid that my life didn't matter enough. But I've learned that bravery doesn't mean not being afraid. It means living anyway. It means choosing to do something meaningful even when you're terrified. It means loving people even though you'll lose them. It means writing this book even though I'll never see how it helps people. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. By Sunday evening, 7 chapters were complete. Only one remained, the answer. What's the answer, Arya? Catherine asked gently. What have you learned? Arya lay back against her pillows, exhausted beyond measure. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes were clear. "The answer is love," she said simply. "Love is always the answer, not the easy kind of love that protects you from pain, the hard kind. The kind that lets people make their own choices, the kind that supports them even when you disagree, the kind that says goodbye even when you want to hold on forever." Louis felt something break inside his chest. This child, this brilliant, dying child, had figured out what took most people a lifetime to understand. "That's beautiful," Catherine said, wiping her eyes. "That's the perfect ending." "Is it finished?" Arya asked. "Is the book done?" "Almost. You need to write the final chapter, the one about the answer, and then Louis needs to finish his foreword." "How long will that take?" "A few more days of work, maybe a week." Arya closed her eyes. "Good, that's good." Alina came to the doorway. "Everyone needs to leave now. Arya needs to sleep." They said their goodbyes and left. As Louis drove home, his phone rang. It was Catherine. "Louis, I need to tell you something. Arya is dying, faster than anyone expected. We might not have a week, we might not even have days." Louis's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Then what do we do?" "We work through the night if we have to. We finish this book. Because it's the only thing keeping her alive right now, the only thing giving her purpose. If we stop working, she'll stop fighting." "Then we don't stop," Louis said. "We finish it, whatever it takes." He turned the car around and drove back to the cottage. When he arrived, Alina met him at the door. "She's sleeping," Alina whispered. "The doctor gave her something for the pain. When she wakes up, we keep writing. We have to finish the book, Mrs. Winters. It's what she needs." Alina nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know she's dying, Mr. Hamilton. I can see it happening. Every day there's less of her. But when she's writing that book, she's alive, really alive. So yes, we keep writing, until the very end." They sat together in the small living room, keeping vigil over a dying child who was racing against time to leave something meaningful behind. Outside, night fell over Devon. Stars appeared in the clear sky. The world continued spinning, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding in one cottage. But inside, something extraordinary was happening. A book was being born, a legacy was being created, and a little girl with a 220 IQ was teaching the world what it really meant to live. Monday morning, 1 week later. The book was nearly finished. 7 complete chapters sat on Catherine's laptop, polished and powerful. Louis had written his foreword over the weekend, pouring his heart into words about a girl who had changed his understanding of courage, choice, and what it meant to truly live. Only one chapter remained, the answer. But Arya was running out of time. She had been awake for less than 3 hours total over the past 2 days. The seizures came more frequently now. The doctors said her brain was shutting down, section by section, as the disease consumed the neural pathways that made her who she was. Louis sat in the Abu Dhabi airport, staring at his boarding pass. The season-ending championship race was this weekend. His team needed him there for practice sessions, media commitments, sponsor obligations. He was fighting for his 8th World Championship, a record that would cement his place as the greatest driver in Formula One history. But all he could think about was Arya. His phone rang. It was Alina, and she was crying. "Mr. Hamilton, you need to come. She's asking for you, the doctors say. They say it could be any day now." Louis looked at his boarding pass again. The flight to Abu Dhabi would leave in 2 hours. If he got on that plane, he would miss Arya's final days, maybe her final hours. But if he didn't get on that plane, he would miss the race, miss the championship, disappoint his team, his sponsors, millions of fans around the world. If you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it? Arya's question echoed in his mind, and suddenly he knew his answer. He had always known it. "I'm coming," he told Alina. "I'm on my way." He called his team principal, Toto Wolff. "I'm not coming to Abu Dhabi." Silence on the other end. Then, "Louis, this is the championship, everything we've worked for all season." "I know, and I'm sorry, but there's a little girl who's dying, and she needs me more than racing needs me right now." "Louis, my mind is made up, Toto. I'm not coming." He hung up and booked a flight back to London, Monday afternoon. Louis arrived at the cottage just before sunset. Alina met him at the door, her face aged by grief and sleepless nights. "She's been waiting for you," Alina whispered. "She won't sleep until she sees you." Arya's bedroom was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon light. Medical equipment beeped softly in the corner, a heart monitor and oxygen machine. The room smelled like antiseptic and lavender, the latter from a diffuser Alina had placed by the window. Arya lay propped up on pillows, so small she barely made a shape under the blankets. Her auburn hair had thinned, spread across the white pillowcase. Her amber eyes were half closed, but they opened when Lewis entered. "You came," she whispered, her voice so weak he had to lean close to hear. "Of course I came." "But the race, Abu Dhabi, your championship." Lewis sat in the chair beside her bed and took her hand. It was cold and fragile, the bones prominent under papery skin. The medical bracelet hung loose on her thin wrist. "The race doesn't matter, Arya. You matter." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "I'm dying, Lewis. I can feel it. Everything is shutting down. Soon I won't be able to think clearly anymore, and I still haven't written the last chapter." "Then let's write it now, together." "I'm too tired to type, too tired to even talk much." "Then I'll type and you'll tell me what to say. However long it takes, we'll finish your book." Catherine arrived 20 minutes later with her laptop. Alina brought tea that Arya couldn't drink and food she couldn't eat. They all gathered in the small bedroom, Lewis, Catherine, Alina, surrounding Arya as she prepared to write her final words. "Are you ready?" Catherine asked gently, opening a new document titled Chapter 8, The Answer. Arya took a shaky breath. "Yes, I'm ready. The last chapter." "Start with this," Arya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Catherine's fingers flew across the keyboard, capturing every word. "Dear reader, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. My name was Arya Winters. I had an IQ of 220. I died at 11 years old, and I want to tell you what I learned about life in the short time I had it." She paused, gathering strength. Lewis squeezed her hand gently, encouragingly. "When I first learned I was dying, I was angry. I thought, why was I given this brilliant mind if I wouldn't live long enough to use it? Why did I understand quantum physics and philosophy and complex mathematics if it all meant nothing in the end? I felt like God or the universe had played a cruel joke on me." Another pause. Arya's breathing was labored now. Alina stood by the window, silent tears streaming down her face. "But then I met someone who taught me to ask different questions. Not why am I dying, but how should I live? Not what's the point of intelligence if I die young, but what can I do with my intelligence right now today?" "Who was this person?" Catherine prompted gently, though she already knew. "His name is Lewis Hamilton. He's a race car driver and he's one of the most successful people in the world. But that's not why he mattered to me. He mattered because he understood something important, that loving someone means letting them make their own choices, even when those choices break your heart." Arya coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Alina rushed over with water, but Arya waved it away. "Keep writing," she insisted. "I need to finish." "I asked Lewis a question once. I asked him if he would give up everything he'd achieved, all his success, all his glory, if it meant saving someone he loved. And you know what? He never answered me directly, but he showed me the answer instead." Lewis felt his throat tighten. He hadn't realized Arya had been watching him so carefully, learning from his actions rather than his words. "The answer is yes. He would. He did. He chose love over glory. He chose to be with me in my dying days instead of chasing another championship. That's the answer to my question. That's always been the answer." Arya's eyes closed. For a moment, everyone thought she had fallen asleep, but then she continued, her voice even weaker. "But here's what I learned. The question itself was wrong. It shouldn't be, would you give up your dreams for someone you love? It should be, can you love someone enough to let them live their own truth? Because that's what Lewis did for me. He didn't try to convince me to take the treatment. He didn't tell me I was making a mistake. He helped me figure out what I needed, and then he supported my choice even though it meant watching me die." "Do you need to rest?" Lewis asked quietly. Arya's face was gray, her lips tinged with blue. "No, almost done." She took several shallow breaths. "Write this next part carefully. It's the most important." "So here's my answer to the biggest question of all. What makes a life meaningful when you know it will be short? The answer is love. Not the easy kind that protects you from pain, the hard kind. The kind that lets people make their own choices. The kind that says, I see you, I understand you, and I support you, even when it hurts. The kind that gives freedom instead of demanding control. Arya opened her eyes and looked directly at Alina. Her grandmother stood at the window, sobbing quietly. "Grandma," Arya whispered, "come here." Alina rushed to the bedside and took Arya's other hand. "This next part is for you," Arya said. Then to Catherine, "Write this. To my grandmother, Alina Winters, thank you for loving me enough to let me choose. Thank you for supporting my decision even though it broke your heart. Thank you for understanding that watching me die my way was the greatest gift you could give me. I know you wanted me to fight, to try the treatment, to live longer, but you loved me enough to let me live truthfully instead. That's the hardest kind of love, and you gave it to me. I am so grateful." Alina collapsed into sobs, laying her head on the bed beside Arya's hand. Arya stroked her grandmother's silver hair with trembling fingers. "Almost finished," she whispered. "Last paragraph. If you're reading this book, maybe you're sick like I was. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're different in ways that make you feel alone. Or maybe you're just trying to figure out how to live a meaningful life in a world that doesn't make sense. Here's what I want you to know: your life matters. Not because of how long it lasts or what you achieve. Your life matters because you exist, because you love and are loved, because you have the courage to be yourself even when it's hard. I'm dying at 11, but I lived more fully in my last few months than most people do in decades. That's not tragedy, that's triumph. And you can triumph too in your own way, in your own time. Just remember, the answer to every important question is love. Choose love, give love, be love. That's how you make a short forever matter." Arya's eyes closed. "That's it, that's the end." "Are you sure?" Catherine asked, her voice thick with tears. "Is there anything else you want to say?" "Just one more thing." Arya's voice was barely audible now. "Sign it." Catherine typed, "With love, Arya Winters." Then she added the dates, 2014-2025. "It's finished," Catherine said quietly. "Your book is finished, Arya." Arya smiled, though she didn't open her eyes. "Good, then I did it. I made my life mean something." That evening, the book was complete. 8 chapters of wisdom, courage, and heartbreaking honesty from a child who had lived more fully in 11 years than most people do in a lifetime. Catherine sent the manuscript to 3 publishers simultaneously. Within 2 hours, all 3 had responded with offers. They wanted to publish Questions for a Short Forever immediately. They wanted Arya's voice to reach children and adults around the world. Alina read the news to Arya, who had been sleeping on and off throughout the evening. "Your book is going to be published, sweetheart. Thousands of people will read it. Your words will help so many children." Arya's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Lewis, who had stayed by her bedside all day. "Did you finish your foreword?" she asked. "Yes. Do you want to hear it?" She nodded weakly. Lewis pulled out his phone and read from the document he had written. "I am Lewis Hamilton, 7-time Formula 1 world champion. I have driven some of the fastest cars ever built. I have stood on podiums in front of millions of people. I have achieved things I once thought impossible, but none of that compares to the privilege of knowing Arya Winters. This little girl with a 220 IQ taught me more about courage than any race ever could. She asked me a question that changed my life. If you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it?" I thought it was a question about sacrifice, about what we give up for our dreams, but Arya taught me it was really a question about love, about whether we can love people enough to let them live and die on their own terms. Arya chose to refuse treatment that might have given her a few more years. Instead, she chose to spend her final months fully alive, creating this book to help others. Some people might call that giving up. I call it the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. When she asked me that question, I didn't answer her directly, but I answered with my actions. I left a championship race to be with her in her final days, and I would make that choice again in a heartbeat, because love is always more important than glory. People are always more important than prizes. Arya lived for only 11 years, but she lived more fully than most people who get 90. She asked the hard questions. She made the brave choices. She loved deeply and chose courageously. This book is her gift to you. Read it carefully. Let her wisdom change you the way it changed me. And remember, life isn't measured in years. It's measured in meaning, in love, in courage, in the choice to be fully yourself even when the world wants you to be someone else. Thank you, Arya, for teaching me what it really means to live. With love and respect, Lewis Hamilton. When he finished reading, the room was silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment and Alina's quiet weeping. Arya looked at Lewis with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding. Thank you for choosing me over the race." "Thank you for asking me the question that changed everything," Lewis replied, his own voice breaking. "Lewis." "Yes." "Did you really give up the championship for me?" "I did." "But why? You worked so hard all season. You could have been an 8-time world champion." Lewis smiled through his tears. "Arya, you taught me that some things matter more than championships. You matter more. Being here with you, helping you finish your book, making sure you know how much you're loved, that's worth more than any trophy." "Do you regret it?" "Not for 1 second." Arya closed her eyes, a peaceful expression on her face. "Then I guess we both found our answers, didn't we? We both learned what really matters." "Yes," Lewis said softly, "we did." She fell asleep then, her breathing shallow but steady. Lewis stayed by her bedside through the night, holding her hand, keeping vigil. Alina dozed in a chair on the other side of the bed, unwilling to leave her granddaughter alone even for a moment. Outside, the world continued spinning. In Abu Dhabi, race cars screamed around the track in practice sessions. Commentators speculated about Lewis's absence. Fans argued online about whether he had made the right choice. But in a small cottage in Devon, none of that mattered. What mattered was a dying child who had finished her book, who had created something meaningful with her brief, brilliant life, who had taught everyone around her what courage really looked like. Lewis checked his phone once during the night. His team had announced his withdrawal from the race. The media was going crazy with speculation. His social media was flooded with messages, some supportive, some critical, some confused. But one message stood out. It was from his brother Nicholas. "You did the right thing. Love matters more than trophies. Arya is lucky to have you. We all are. Proud of you, brother." Lewis smiled and put his phone away. Nicholas understood. That was enough. As dawn broke over Devon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lewis watched Arya sleep and thought about the question that had started everything. He had his answer now, and it was simple, profound, perfect. Yes, he would give up racing to save someone he loved. He already had. And he would do it again without hesitation. Because in the end, the only things that truly mattered were love, courage, and the choice to show up for the people who needed you, even when the world wanted you somewhere else. That was the answer. That had always been the answer. Tuesday morning. Arya didn't wake up. Lewis sat by her bedside through the sunrise, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow, irregular breaths. The monitors beeped steadily, but the numbers were declining. Heart rate slower, oxygen levels dropping, blood pressure falling. Alina had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep in the chair, her hand still clutching Arya's. Catherine had gone home around midnight but promised to return first thing in the morning. A hospice nurse named Margaret arrived at 7 o'clock. She was a gentle woman in her 60s who had sat with hundreds of dying patients. She checked Arya's vitals quietly, trying not to wake Alina. "How long?" Lewis asked in a whisper. Margaret looked at him with kind, sad eyes. "Hours, maybe a day at most. Her body is shutting down, but she's not in pain. The medication is keeping her comfortable." "Will she wake up again?" "It's hard to say. Sometimes patients rally at the end. Sometimes they slip away peacefully in their sleep. There's no way to know." Lewis nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Margaret checked the IV line and adjusted Arya's pillows slightly. "You're Lewis Hamilton, aren't you? The race car driver." "Yes." "My grandson watches you race. He's going to be upset that you missed Abu Dhabi." She smiled gently. "But I think you made the right choice. This little girl needs you more than any race ever could." "She's extraordinary," Lewis said quietly, looking at Arya's peaceful face. "She taught me more in a few weeks than I've learned in years." "The dying often do," Margaret said. "They see things clearly that the rest of us miss. They understand what really matters." She placed a gentle hand on Lewis's shoulder. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything, but I think you should talk to her. Even if she can't respond, she can probably still hear you. Say the things you need to say." After Margaret left, Louis sat in silence for a long time. What did you say to someone who was dying? How did you put a lifetime of gratitude and love and heartbreak into words? He thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 weeks. How Arya had walked into that meet and greet and asked him the one question that would change his entire understanding of life. How her amber eyes had seen right through him, seeing not a champion, but just a man trying to figure out what mattered. "Arya," he said softly, leaning close to her ear, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to tell you something." Her breathing didn't change, but her fingers twitched slightly in his hand. "You asked me once if I would give up racing to save someone I love, and yesterday I finally answered that question. I gave up a championship race to be here with you, and I need you to know I don't regret it, not for 1 second." A single tear rolled down Arya's cheek, though her eyes remained closed. "You taught me that life isn't about achievements or glory. It's about the people we love and the choices we make to honor that love. You're 11 years old, Arya, and you're wiser than I'll ever be." Louis wiped his own eyes with his free hand. "Your book is finished. Questions for a Short Forever is going to help so many kids. Your words, your wisdom, your courage, it's all going to live on long after you're gone. You did it, Arya. You made your life matter. You created something beautiful and meaningful and lasting." Alina stirred in her chair, waking slowly. When she saw Louis talking to Arya, she stayed quiet, listening. "I wish I had more time with you," Louis continued. "I wish I could see you grow up, see what else your brilliant mind would discover, see who you would become. But you taught me that wishing for different circumstances is pointless. We have to work with the time we're given, not the time we wish we had." He squeezed her hand gently. "So thank you, Arya Winters. Thank you for asking me the impossible question. Thank you for being brave enough to choose your own path. Thank you for teaching me what courage really looks like. Thank you for writing a book that will change lives. Thank you for letting me be part of your story." Louis laid his head down on the bed beside Arya's hand, exhausted from emotion and sleeplessness. "You can let go now," he whispered. "You finished your book. You made your life matter. You loved and were loved. You did everything you needed to do. It's okay to rest now." For a long moment, nothing changed. Then Arya's eyes fluttered open, just slightly, just enough to see Louis through her lashes. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Louis leaned closer. "What did you say, sweetheart?" She tried again, her voice the barest whisper. "Was I wrong?" Louis felt his heart shatter. "What? Should I have taken the treatment? Should I have tried to live longer?" This brilliant child facing death, still questioning her choice, still wondering if she had made a mistake. Louis lifted his head and looked directly into Arya's amber eyes. He needed her to see his face, to see the absolute certainty there. "No, Arya, you weren't wrong. You were brave. You chose to live your truth instead of someone else's expectations. That's the most courageous thing anyone can do." "But Grandma," she wanted. "Your grandma wanted you to be happy and true to yourself," Louis said firmly. "Even though it broke her heart to watch you refuse treatment, she supported your choice because she loved you enough to let you decide. That's real love, Arya. Not trying to control someone, just loving them exactly as they are." Alina moved to the other side of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "He's right, sweetheart. I'm not angry. I'm not disappointed. I'm proud of you. So proud of the choice you made, the book you wrote, the person you were." Arya's eyes moved between Louis and Alina. A small smile crossed her lips. "So I wasn't selfish." "No," Louis and Alina said together. "You were authentic," Louis added. "You were true. You chose quality over quantity, meaning over duration. That's not selfish. That's wise." Arya's smile grew slightly wider. "Good, that's good." Her eyes started to close again. Alina leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Arya, more than anything in this world. Being your grandmother was the greatest privilege of my life." "Love you too, Grandma." The words came out slurred, weak. "Thank you for letting me choose." Arya's eyes closed fully. Her breathing became even more shallow. Margaret appeared in the doorway, having heard the voices. She checked the monitors and gave Lewis and Alina a meaningful look. Not long now. Lewis held Arya's hand and thought about all the conversations they'd had, all the questions she had asked, all the wisdom she had shared. This little girl with a 220 IQ who had understood what took most people decades to learn. "Arya," he said gently, "can I ask you one more question?" Her eyes didn't open, but her fingers squeezed his hand weakly. "You spent your whole life asking questions. You asked me about sacrifice and choice and what makes life meaningful. But I need to know, did you find your answers? Do you understand now what you were looking for?" For a long moment, there was only the sound of the monitors and Arya's labored breathing. Lewis thought maybe she had slipped back into unconsciousness, but then she spoke, her voice so quiet he had to lean close to hear. "Yes, the answer is love. It's always been love." "What kind of love?" Lewis asked, tears streaming down his face. "Tell me, Arya, help me understand." She took a shaky breath. "The kind that lets go, the kind that gives freedom, the kind that supports choices, even when they hurt." Another breath. "You showed me that love, Lewis. You let me choose death over false hope. That's the bravest kind of love." Alina sobbed openly now, her whole body shaking. "And the book?" Lewis asked. "Your legacy, does it give you peace?" Arya's lips curved into the faintest smile. "The book isn't my legacy. You are, all of you, the love. You gave me the choices. You let me make. That's what lasts." Lewis felt like he couldn't breathe. This child was teaching him even now, in her final moments, that legacy wasn't about what you left behind on paper. It was about how you changed the people who loved you. "Arya, is there anything else you need to say? Anything else you want us to know?" She was quiet for so long that Lewis thought she had fallen asleep again. But then she spoke one last time, her voice barely audible. "Tell them, tell the children who read my book, that short lives can be complete lives. Tell them not to be afraid of endings. Endings are just new beginnings for the people who loved us." Her breathing became even more irregular. The monitors started beeping urgently. Margaret moved quickly to silence them, knowing the sounds would only cause more distress. "Is this it?" Alina asked, her voice breaking. "Is she dying now?" Margaret nodded gently. "Yes, it won't be long." Alina climbed onto the bed beside Arya, gathering her granddaughter into her arms. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. You're not alone." Lewis stayed on the other side, still holding Arya's hand. "We're both here. We love you so much." Arya's eyes opened one last time. They were clear, bright, fully present. She looked at Alina, then at Lewis, and her smile was peaceful content. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for letting me live my way." "It was an honor," Lewis said through his tears. "Thank you for teaching us what living really means." Arya's eyes closed, her breathing slowed. The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by Alina's quiet weeping and the soft beeping of monitors. Lewis thought about Arya's question, the one that had started everything. If you could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone you love, would you do it? He had his answer now. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because racing was what he did, but love was who he was. And sitting here, holding the hand of a dying child who had taught him the meaning of courage, he understood that choosing love over glory was never a sacrifice. It was the only choice that mattered. Arya took 3 more breaths, each one slower than the last, each one more peaceful. Then she took no more breaths at all. The monitors went silent. The room went still. Alina held her granddaughter close, rocking her gently, singing a lullaby through her tears. Lewis kept holding Arya's hand, unable to let go, unwilling to accept that this brilliant, beautiful soul was gone. Margaret checked for a pulse, for breathing, for any sign of life. Then she looked at Lewis and Alina with tears in her own eyes. "She's gone. I'm so sorry. She's at peace now." Alina let out a wail of grief so profound that Lewis felt it in his bones. He moved to the bed and wrapped his arms around both of them, the grandmother and the girl, the living and the dead, the heartbroken and the peaceful. They stayed like that for a long time. The morning sun streamed through the window, warming the room. Birds sang outside. Life continued, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding in this cottage. But for Lewis, Alina, and everyone who had known Arya Winters, life would never be quite the same. She had changed them, challenged them, taught them what it meant to live fully in the face of death. Finally, Margaret gently suggested that they let her prepare Arya's body. Elinor kissed her granddaughter's forehead one last time and whispered, "Goodbye, my darling. Thank you for being mine, even if it was only for a little while." Lewis touched Arya's hand one last time. "Goodbye, Arya. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. Thank you for showing me what really matters." They left the room together, leaving Margaret to do her work. In the living room, surrounded by all of Arya's books and questions written on sticky notes, Lewis and Elinor held each other and cried. "She was right," Elinor said eventually, "about the choice. She was right to refuse the treatment. I see that now. Those last few weeks, writing her book, living fully, being true to herself, that was worth more than years of fear and suffering." "She was the bravest person I've ever known," Lewis said, "and the wisest." His phone buzzed. It was a message from the publishers. They had rushed production on Questions for a Short Forever. The book would be released next month. Pre-orders were already in the thousands. Arya's voice would reach the world after all. Her wisdom would live on. Her questions would help children and adults understand what it meant to live meaningfully regardless of how much time they had. Lewis thought about Arya's final words. "The book isn't my legacy. You are." She was right. The real legacy wasn't the pages in a book. It was the changed hearts, the transformed perspectives, the people who would live differently because they had known Arya Winters or read her words. Lewis had come to Arya's life seeking to give her something: understanding, support, purpose. But she had given him so much more. She had answered the question he hadn't even known he was asking: what makes life worth living? The answer was simple. It was always simple: love, choice, courage, truth. Living fully in the time you have instead of fearfully wishing for more time. As the sun climbed higher in the Devon sky, Lewis Hamilton sat in a cottage surrounded by books and sticky notes covered with a dead child's questions, and he understood that he would carry Arya with him forever, not as a burden of grief, but as a gift of wisdom. She had asked him the hardest question of his life, and in helping her find her answer, he had found his own. 2 months later. The funeral had been small and private, just as Arya had requested in the notes she'd left behind. Elinor, Lewis, Catherine, and a handful of others who had known Arya gathered in the Devon churchyard on a gray morning. They buried her beside her parents, finally reuniting the family that death had separated. Lewis gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears. He talked about a girl who asked impossible questions and found beautiful answers. He talked about courage that looked like acceptance instead of fighting. He talked about a legacy that wasn't measured in years but in wisdom. Arya Winters lived for 11 years, Lewis said, standing beside the small casket covered in white roses. But she lived more fully than most people who get 90. She taught us that meaning isn't about duration. It's about depth. It's about truth. It's about love. He paused, looking at the gathered mourners. "She asked me a question once that changed my life. And now I'm asking all of you the same question. What will you do with the time you have? Will you live fearfully or courageously? Will you choose what others expect or what your heart knows is true? Will you love deeply, even knowing that love ends in loss?" The casket was lowered into the ground. Elinor threw the first handful of earth, whispering goodbye to the granddaughter who had been her whole world. Lewis added his own handful, feeling the finality of it settle into his bones. After the service, Elinor pulled Lewis aside. Her face was thinner, aged by grief, but there was something peaceful in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything you did for her, for understanding what she needed, for supporting her choice even when it was hard." "She changed my life," Lewis replied. "I should be thanking you for sharing her with me." Elinor smiled sadly. "She would have died alone and scared if not for you. Instead, she died peaceful and complete. That's a gift I can never repay." They stood together in the churchyard, watching the gravediggers finish their work. Arya's headstone was simple but perfect. Arya Winters, 2014-2025. She asked the questions that mattered, present day, book launch. Now 2 months after the funeral, Lewis stood in a London bookstore surrounded by hundreds of people. The launch event for Questions for a Short Forever had drawn a massive crowd: children, parents, teachers, journalists, and fans who had followed the story of the girl who had changed a champion's life. The book sat on display tables throughout the store, its cover simple and beautiful. A young girl sitting beneath a tree, looking up at stars, with questions written in the sky above her. Arya's face wasn't on the cover. Alina had insisted on that. The book was meant to speak to all children, not just memorialize one. Lewis's foreword opened the book. Then came Arya's 8 chapters, each one filled with wisdom that seemed impossible from an 11-year-old. The writing was clear, honest, sometimes heartbreaking. She wrote about intelligence versus wisdom, about loving people you would lose, about choosing your own path even when it disappointed others. The final chapter, The Answer, was the shortest but most powerful. In just 3 pages, Arya had distilled everything she'd learned about what made life meaningful. Love is the answer, not the easy kind that protects you from pain, but the hard kind that gives freedom, the kind that supports choices you don't agree with, the kind that lets go when holding on would be selfish. That's what makes life meaningful, not how long you live, but how deeply you love. Early reviews had been extraordinary. The Times called it the most important book about life and death written in a generation. Schools were already adding it to their curriculum. Support groups for terminally ill children were ordering copies in bulk, but more importantly, children were reading it. They were finding comfort in Arya's words, understanding that their lives mattered regardless of how different or difficult or short they might be. Lewis took the microphone as the crowd settled. He looked out at all the faces, young and old, healthy and sick, each one seeking something in Arya's story. "Thank you all for coming," he began. This book wouldn't exist without the extraordinary courage of one little girl who refused to let her short life be meaningless. Arya Winters was 11 years old when she died. She had Batten disease. She refused treatment that might have given her a few more years, and instead, she spent her final months creating this. He held up the book. Some people said she gave up. Some said she was too young to make that choice. But Arya taught me that choosing how you live and how you die isn't giving up. It's taking control of your own story. A young girl in the front row raised her hand. She looked about 9 with a scarf covering her bald head, clearly undergoing cancer treatment. "Yes," Lewis said, pointing to her. "Did Arya ever regret her choice? Was she ever scared she made a mistake?" Lewis smiled sadly. "She asked me that same question in her final hours. She said, 'Was I wrong? Should I have taken the treatment?' And I told her no. She was brave. She chose to live her truth instead of someone else's expectations." He paused, gathering himself. "But yes, she was scared, every day. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means living anyway, choosing anyway, loving anyway." An older woman stood up. "My daughter has cystic fibrosis. She's 12. She's been asking questions like Arya's questions, about whether her life matters if it's going to be short. How do I answer her?" Lewis felt his throat tight. This was why Arya had written the book, for children asking these exact questions. Tell her what Arya would say, that life isn't measured in years, it's measured in meaning, in love, in the courage to be yourself even when it's hard. Tell her that a short life lived fully is worth more than a long life lived fearfully. And tell her, Lewis's voice cracked, tell her that she matters just by existing, just by being herself. The woman wiped tears from her eyes and sat down. For the next hour, Lewis answered questions, signed books, and shared stories about Arya. Alina sat beside him, adding her own memories, laughing through tears as she talked about her brilliant, stubborn, beautiful granddaughter. A journalist asked the question Lewis had been waiting for. "You gave up the Abu Dhabi race to be with Arya. You gave up a potential 8th world championship. Do you regret that decision?" Lewis looked directly at the camera recording the event. "Not for 1 second. Arya asked me a question once. If I could go back and choose never to have raced at all, but it would mean saving someone I love, would I do it? At the time, I didn't have an answer, but now I do." He paused, making sure everyone understood. "Yes, I would, because love matters more than glory. People matter more than prizes. Championships are incredible, but they're not what makes life meaningful. Relationships are. Choices are. Being there for someone who needs you is." "But you worked so hard all season." "And I'll work hard again," Lewis interrupted gently. "Racing isn't over for me, but sitting with Arya in her final days, helping her finish her book, making sure she knew she was loved, that was more important than any race. And I would make that choice again in a heartbeat." The crowd burst into applause. Some people stood, others wiped tears from their eyes. After the signing ended, after the last book was purchased and the crowd dispersed, Lewis and Alina sat alone in the quiet bookstore. "She did it," Alina said softly, running her fingers over a copy of the book. "She made her life matter. This book is going to help thousands of children." "Millions," Lewis corrected. "It's already being translated into 20 languages. Schools in 15 countries are adding it to their curriculum. Arya's voice is going to reach the entire world." Alina smiled through fresh tears. She would be so proud and so overwhelmed. She never thought of herself as anyone special. "But she was," Lewis said. "She was extraordinary." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Alina pulled an envelope from her purse. "She left this for you. I was supposed to give it to you after the book was published. I think she knew she might not live to see this day." Lewis took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in Arya's neat handwriting. He opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Dear Lewis, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and my book is published. It means I did it. I made my short life matter, and that's because of you. You asked me once what I wanted to do with my time. I told you I wanted to matter. I wanted my intelligence to mean something before I died. You made that happen. You helped me write this book. You supported my choice to refuse treatment. You loved me enough to let me be myself, even when being myself meant dying young. I need you to know something, Lewis. The question I asked you that first day, about whether you'd give up racing to save someone you love, that question wasn't just about you. It was about me too. I was asking if it was okay to choose quality over quantity, to choose authenticity over fear, to choose a short, meaningful life over a longer, compromised one. You showed me the answer by your actions, not your words. You left a championship race to be with me. You chose love over glory. That's the answer to my question. That's always been the answer. But here's what I need you to understand now that I'm gone. You can't save everyone. You can't make people's choices for them. All you can do is love them enough to support whatever they choose. That's what you did for me. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. So please don't carry guilt about my death. Don't wonder if you could have convinced me to take the treatment. Don't question whether you did enough. You did everything right. You gave me exactly what I needed: freedom, support, and unconditional love. My grandmother is going to need you after I'm gone. She's going to struggle with my choice. She's going to wonder if she should have fought harder to make me take the treatment. Please remind her that letting me choose was the most loving thing she could have done. Please help her understand that watching me die my way was her gift to me. And Lewis, keep racing. Keep inspiring people. Keep showing the world what courage looks like. Because you taught me that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about living fully despite the fear. Racing is part of who you are. Don't give it up because of me. Honor my memory by living your truth the way I lived mine. One last thing, remember the questions. Don't stop asking the hard questions about what matters and why and how to live meaningfully. That's what separates existing from truly living. The willingness to ask questions that don't have easy answers. Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me as more than a dying child. Thank you for believing in my book. Thank you for supporting my choice. Thank you for showing me what love really means. I hope we changed each other for the better. I know you changed me. With love and gratitude, Arya. P.S. The answer to every important question is love. Remember that, teach that, live that. Lewis read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Alina watched him, her own eyes wet. She was remarkable, Lewis finally said. 11 years old, and she understood things that most adults never figure out. She learned it from you, Alina said. She learned about love and choice and courage by watching you. Lewis shook his head. No, she taught me. I came into her life thinking I would help her, but she helped me. She answered questions I didn't even know I was asking. He carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. He would keep it forever, a reminder of the girl who had changed his understanding of everything. What will you do now? Alina asked. Will you go back to racing? Yes, Arya was right. Racing is part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am anymore. I'm also the person who knew Arya Winters, who learned from her, who was changed by her. Lewis smiled. I'm creating a foundation in her name. The Arya Winters Foundation, dedicated to supporting terminally ill children and their families. Every child should have the support Arya had. Every child should be able to choose how they spend their final days. Alina's face lit up. She would love that. And I'm going to keep sharing her story. Keep making sure people understand that short lives can be complete lives. That meaning isn't about duration, it's about depth. They stood to leave, and Lewis took one last look at the display of Arya's books. Dozens of copies, each one holding her wisdom, her courage, her voice. Questions for a Short Forever. The title was perfect, because Arya's questions would continue forever, challenging readers to think deeply about what made life meaningful. And her answers, simple, profound, beautiful, would help people understand that love was always the answer to every important question. As Lewis walked out of the bookstore into the London evening, his phone buzzed with a message from Nicholas. Saw the launch on the news. You did good, brother. Arya would be proud. We all are. Lewis smiled and typed back. She taught me what really matters. I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring that lesson. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, in whatever came after life, he hoped Arya knew what she had accomplished. He hoped she understood that her short life had created ripples that would spread across the world, touching millions of lives, answering millions of questions. She had asked him the hardest question of his life, and in helping her find her answer, he had found his own. Love was always the answer. Love that gave freedom instead of demanding control. Love that supported choices even when they broke your heart. Love that said, I see you, I understand you, and I will let you be yourself, even if being yourself means leaving me. That was the answer to Arya's question. That was the answer to every question that mattered. And Lewis Hamilton, 8-time world champion wannabe turned 7-time champion with no regrets, would spend the rest of his life teaching that truth to anyone who would listen. Because a little girl with amber eyes and a 220 IQ had taught him what really mattered. And he would never forget her lesson. Lewis stood in the same Devon churchyard, now covered in autumn leaves. The headstone was weathered now, but still clear. Arya Winters, 2014-2025. She asked the questions that mattered. Below it, they had added something new. Her answer lives on. Questions for a Short Forever had sold over 5 million copies worldwide. It had been translated into 42 languages. It was required reading in schools across 28 countries. The Arya Winters Foundation had helped over 10,000 terminally ill children and their families. Arya's voice had reached the world. Alina stood beside Lewis, older now but at peace. She would be 16 today, she said quietly. I wonder what she would be like if she had lived. Lewis thought about it. She'd be asking even harder questions, challenging everything, making everyone around her think deeper and live fuller. Yes, Alina agreed, smiling. Yes, she would. They stood in silence, remembering. Then Lewis placed a single white rose on the grave and whispered, Thank you, Arya, for the question, for the answer, for teaching me what it means to really live. As they walked back through the churchyard, a young girl approached them. She looked about 11 with curious eyes and a notebook clutched to her chest. Excuse me, she said shyly. Are you Lewis Hamilton, the one who knew Arya Winters? Yes, Lewis said, kneeling to her level. Did you read her book? The girl nodded enthusiastically. 3 times. I have cancer and the doctors say I might not get better, but Arya's book taught me that my life still matters, that I can still choose how to spend my time. That short can still be meaningful. Lewis felt his eyes burn with tears. What's your name? Lily. Well, Lily, Arya would be so happy to know her words helped you. What will you do with your time? Lily opened her notebook, revealing pages filled with her own questions and thoughts. I'm going to write too. Maybe not a whole book like Arya, but my own questions and answers. For my little brother, so he understands that I lived, not just died. Lewis smiled through his tears. That's perfect, Lily. That's exactly what Arya would want. As they said goodbye and Lily walked away, Alina whispered, She's still teaching them, even now, even 5 years later. Yes, Lewis agreed. She'll always be teaching them. That's what legacy means. Not that you lived, but that your life changed how others live. They left the churchyard together, carrying Arya with them in their hearts, in their choices, in their understanding of what really mattered. And somewhere, in some way beyond understanding, Lewis liked to imagine that Arya was smiling, that she knew her short forever had become everyone's forever, that her questions would never stop mattering, that her answer, Love, always love, would echo through eternity. If this story touched your heart, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Are you from the UK, the US, India, or somewhere else in the world? We love hearing from our global family. And if Arya's message of courage and love moved you today, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you help us spread these stories of kindness, bravery, and what really matters in life to people who need to hear them. Arya taught us that a short life lived with purpose is worth more than a long life lived with fear. Let's honor her memory by spreading that message of hope to as many people as possible. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another inspiring story that will change how you see the world. Remember, love is always the answer.